The story begins with someone saying that there are 10 minutes left until the appointment, and the girl suggests that the two of them have a glass of milk. His proposal makes her insecure, thinking that because of this, a man would find her childish. But he promptly accepts, saying he is thirsty. This response makes the girl very happy. She then turns quickly to get the dried persimmon she received from her grandmother. Happy with the situation, the boy remembers that he is undergoing psychotherapy but feels as if it were a romantic date. Reflecting on the situation, he concludes that this feeling of being in a dream is amplified by the fact that it's Christmas Eve. When he finally reaches the main hall, he comes face to face with a huge Christmas tree. The decorations on the tree catch his attention and he begins to examine them closely. With his special vision, the boy can even see the molecular composition of the ornaments, and he sees that they contain iodine and bromine. Attracted by the molecular composition of the decorations, the boy gets very close to touch them. When his finger touches the Christmas balls, something happens. A reaction starts to occur as if a stream of energy passes through all of them, making them shine. The boy was entertained by the tree, but a voice interrupts his concentration, asking what he is doing. The girl says the tree is beautiful and looks at the decorations around, and he wonders if she really liked it. Seeing the smile on the girl's face, he is very happy with the adjustments he made to the tree. However, the elements become a little unstable. It seems that the filament holding that Christmas ball is going to burn. He says he can't afford to slack off in this situation. He calls the girl by the name Yoon Yesil and asks if she wants to see a magic trick. Confused, she replies yes. The man says he just touched the ornaments with light and they started to shine like this. The brightness is so much that it leaves the girl extremely surprised. A golden light emanates from the tree. She is surprised and asks if chemistry is like magic, because she had never seen a tree that emitted a glow that warmed her. The man says that happened because a chemist touched it, and she could call it the chemistry tree. The girl laughs and asks what kind of name that is. Later in the day, the two go to the psychotherapy session. There, the psychologist gives them the instructions they should follow during the week. The man would like to know from the professional how she is going to control whether he did the tasks or not. The psychologist says that this is the patient's responsibility and that commitment is part of the therapeutic process, which is very important in Jungwoo's case. The first step of the treatment is to be with someone you like. While listening to this, Jungwoo and Yoon exchange glances. The goal of the treatment is to keep them in the same mental state as when they are doing something they really enjoy, and the same applies to the girl. Lee is too much for her to do everything during the week because it's all very complicated. But the therapist encourages her, saying that she is doing very well. The professional says that's all for today's session and thanks both of them for their commitment. Later, the couple dresses to go out and takes the elevator down to the street. The girl starts to make small talk but is interrupted by the man's phone ringing in his pocket. The boy asks the girl to wait a moment and answers the phone. As soon as he answers, someone on the other end says they are in big trouble, and the white-haired man asks if the guy who called got kicked in the butt. The man on the other end of the line continues explaining that it's not that, but that he lost his wallet because he was arm in arm with someone walking carelessly, and that he's at the cafe recommended by Jungwoo asking him to please come and save him. The man says he will help him just this once. The girl asks if it was his brother on the phone and what was going on. The man replies that his brother lost his wallet on his first date and that he got so emotional that he ended up losing it. The girl is impressed that the man's brother is with someone else. Han is thoughtful about the situation. The girl asks if the boy will come with her next time since she will return next week. He says he should continue until he gets better. Anyway, Jungwoo thanks her and says he will see her next week. The girl also thanks him and says goodnight to the boy. She questions whether she's doing the work right, hitting her chest and wondering if she's playing the fool's role. The girl returns to the car and greets her manager, who says she did a good job and asks if something happened for her to be smiling so much. The girl says it was nothing but it's just her usual natural smile. But he knows it's been a long time since he's seen the sparkle in her eyes and mentions the recommendations from her director, which were wonderful. She rereads a sheet with the recommendations and the data that were handed to her. The girl wonders if she will be able to do all that because the first step was very difficult, but she thinks she must do everything since she needs to submit a report to her director next week. While driving, she sees Jung-woo at the bus stop and remembers that he said he was going to help his brother. Heading to the cafe she had suggested, the man looks at his phone, reflecting on the situation while eyeing the instructions he's holding in his hand. She thinks for a moment and tells her manager that it's been a while since she's been to adjust. Then she suggests they visit it. The manager agrees and says that since it's Christmas Eve, they'll be able to listen to some music there. But before going, the girl says she'll bring a friend. Jung-woo sees a van suddenly stopping in front of him. This leaves him a little confused by the sudden act. The door opens and it's Lee calling him to get into the car. She asks if the boy wasn't heading to the cafe and invites him to go together. He asks if he can do that. She says yes he can, and then he should hurry up. Manager Ji greets him. As he gets into the car and the boy greets him with a gesture, she finally recognizes him. He was the same man who was with Lee last week. He had a thermal bag in his hands. Han Jung-woo worked at the chemical industrial company and had made a great presentation to showcase his artificial snow, which earned him the nickname the White Wizard due to his performances. Ji asks if he didn't receive a phone call from his agency. He says there's no need to walk around the city. Just talk to him if he's interested in something because his agency is a subsidiary of KG Chemical Industry. The manager ruins the mood with his business talk. Lee shoots him a look to make sure he gets the message. Ji understands very well what that look means and says he'll leave the business talk for later, focusing on driving. Han looks at his phone while thinking that he's already too busy with his work. The girl asks how his brother is doing and he replies that everything is fine, but also asks why she's going to the cafe. She says she's doing it to stick to her schedule, but since it's Christmas Eve, she's trying to get into the festive spirit. During a regular day on the city streets, a man opens a can of beer and starts drinking it eagerly. He looks like Han Jung-woo but has black hair. He says he'll finally be able to live his life. Just then, his phone vibrates, indicating a message has arrived. Very anxious for the response, he wonders if he got the open position. The phone keeps making notification sounds. He starts messing with his phone, praying that everything went well, and finally opens the message that arrived. As he begins to read it, his expression changes. The message thanks him for participating in the selection process but unfortunately informs him that he didn't pass the second round of interview. This leaves the man completely catatonic. He's very sad about it and can't say anything. When he recovers from the shock, he says he already knew this was going to happen, grabs another can of beer from the bag, and drinks it quickly with a desolate look. When he's done, he leaves the cans on the table and starts walking home. At night, he approaches the place where he lives, a small alley with several apartments. As he climbs the stairs, his steps seem very heavy. At the top of the stairs is his apartment. He opens the door to enter his home. As the door opens, it makes a very loud creaking sound. Still desolate, the man enters the apartment. He throws his phone and a kind of pill onto the table. He sits on his bed. Looking around, it's clear the apartment is quite modest with few furnishings. Still very sad, he stares ahead as if facing the void. Thinking about what happened recently, he remains motionless on his bed. As the night progresses, the boy starts drinking several cans of beer along with other alcoholic beverages. Inside a box with the KG Chemical Industries logo, there is a small display with the label F12. The boy is sitting, feeling relieved and drunk, but soon he starts to feel extremely pathetic. He looks at the table full of drinks. Because of this, the boy changes his mood and says he's using his rent money to buy alcohol. This makes him very angry, and he throws the still full can onto the table, wondering what he should do beyond what he's already doing and that there's nothing he can do now. The cans and their liquid contents spill onto the floor. Then he puts his hand on his head and groans in pain, beginning to feel desperate about the situation he's in. Despite being intoxicated, he tries to think of a solution but sees no way forward. So he starts to cry uncontrollably. While crying, he puts his hand over his face to cover his eyes. After some time, he takes a deep breath, trying to calm down. He wipes his nose and mouth with his hand. With his eyes still full of tears, something on the table catches his attention. It's the AF-12 pill sitting on the table, which reminds him of how he got it. The man starts to remember the day he received the pill. He was selected for a clinical trial, but he hadn't signed up for the trial. Even so, they contacted him, knowing he was in financial trouble. A few days ago, while at another job, Jung-woo was wearing a mascot costume for a store. A child lovingly kisses the mascot he's portraying, a kind of cat from a beauty salon. We then see the child saying goodbye to him. He sits down to hydrate, because with the heat and the costume, the boy is sweating excessively. While resting for a bit, his phone rings, and he was already expecting this call. So he quickly takes the phone out of his jacket pocket. The messages are from the owner of the apartment the boy is renting, and the rent is already 3 months overdue. If he doesn't pay, the owner will contact Jung-woo's mother. Upon receiving this news, the boy becomes very upset. The day goes by, and 2 people can be heard talking about something that happened the previous day. One of the ladies says that Jung-woo's father was sentenced, and she hopes the boy gets child support. A relative of Han tells the woman not to talk nonsense, that she should go home soon because the bank is about to close. Jung-woo is there, overhearing the conversation. The boy is worried because he saw the family's bank accounts, and they are drowning in loans and interest, and this worries him a lot. He is a very nice box with a cake inside. The woman asks what's going on with that little boy, but the boy only thinks that he should leave home. He leaves the birthday cake on the table without being seen and walks into an alley further down the street. As he walks toward the avenue, the sounds of cars begin to emerge, along with the buses passing by. The man is sitting on the bus bench, and his expression shows that it's a very difficult situation to deal with. On the television, the news reports that KG Chemical Industries now has over 14,000 employees in Korea alone and another 11,000 in multinational companies around the world. The industry produces electronic equipment such as display screens and batteries, as well as other everyday items, fabrics, healthcare, medicine, beverages, etc. The KG Group is responsible for manufacturing all these products. Jung-woo's phone begins to ring in his pocket. Some time passes before the boy finally notices. He then puts his hand in his pocket to retrieve it. He takes the phone out of his pocket and holds it in his hand to unlock it. The phone is unlocked using his fingerprint. It's his younger brother messaging him, asking if he was the one who bought the cake and left it at home, and if he was going to abandon them. The boy replies, telling his brother to say happy birthday to their mother and to eat the cake with her. His brother asks why he won't come eat with them. Jung-woo replies that he has something to do. Suddenly, a bank notification appears on his phone, saying that his loan is nearing its due date. This message leaves Han even more disconcerted because he doesn't have much money in his bank account, especially now that he's left home and has nowhere to stay for the night. He puts the phone in his pocket and then finds something surprising inside that he had almost forgotten about, a Ziploc bag containing a pill. He lifts it up and sees that both the bag and the pill are transparent. The boy remembers that he needs to take it with dinner, and he also doesn't know the effects of that medication, but given his current situation, it makes him think about it. He's so far down that anything is better than nothing. After all, the boy owes 3 months of rent, and for his student loan the family store was used as collateral, and the interest just keeps increasing every moment. Han begins to remember the situation when he received that medication. The KG company representative handed him a pill and said to take the medication and report the results. If the experiment is successful, he won't have to worry about money anymore. Back in his apartment, the boy contemplates this possibility while looking at the pill known as AF-12. His judgment is clouded by intoxication and by the entire situation he's living through. He thinks there can't be any harm because it won't kill him. He throws the pill into his mouth and swallows it. This medication is quickly absorbed by his body, but as it is absorbed, the boy begins to gain some perceptions, basic notions of mathematics, formulas, and chemical representations. He starts to understand carbon chains and the relationships between them, and also has a mathematical understanding of the universe itself. All of this fills the boy's mind in an overwhelming way. All this knowledge absorbed at once causes Han to collapse onto his bed, feeling as if someone is strangling him. A muffled voice behind a mask asks where the drug is. Someone wearing a gas mask is on top of him. He says he already took the whole pill. The masked man asks if there's nothing left, his hand still around his neck. The boy says there's nothing left. The masked man pulls out a gun and says that if the boy doesn't want a hole in his head, he should provide the chemical formula. All of this is nothing more than a kind of hallucination. The boy can see himself in the TV show he's watching on his phone. His eyes show extreme exhaustion as he looks from his phone to the room with a look of complete despair. He stretches, saying that the day was very strange and that he's still not sleepy. His phone vibrates again, indicating a notification, and the boy checks what it's about. A message asks if he's still awake. He replies that he is. Suddenly, he is surprised by what he sees on the screen. It's a message from the company representative asking to meet right now. Ewan, now with white hair and different colored eyes, leaves Han surprised by the message. He reads it several times as it repeats over and over in his mind. The city is quiet in the early hours of the morning. A headlight catches Han's attention. She's here, he thinks as he looks at his phone, hearing the engines rumble. The boy approaches the car with its headlights on. The light is so strong that it hurts his eyes. Suddenly, the headlight of the parked blue car turns off. The boy finds the situation strange, and then the light comes back on as he walks, wondering if this is a sign to approach the car because he feels very unsure about the situation. When he gets there, he asks for permission and the passenger door opens. Han understands that he should enter through the other door. He sits in the passenger seat. The door closes softly, and Han is a little anxious about the situation, looking down at his feet. He then begins to notice the papers in the person's hand. The woman aligns the various papers she's holding on the steering wheel. She introduces herself as a senior director of KG Chemical, and her name is Moon Chae-yun. Someone in such a high position leaves Han quite surprised. He introduces himself, saying his name is Han Jung-woo. The director wants to ask a few questions to prepare a diagnosis for him. The woman asks if he has slept since taking the pill, and the startled boy responds that he hasn't. He was looking outside the car. Suddenly, the woman turns her face toward him, getting close and asking to see something. Coming even closer, she says that it seems nothing has changed. The woman is so close that the boy starts to stammer. Stammering, he calls her Ms. Chae-yun. Still looking at him closely, she tells him to call her Dr. Moon. Feeling very embarrassed, the boy asks how KG Chemical knows him and if they were the ones who sent the pill to him. She asks if he has ever been to one of the hospitals operated by the chemical company. Han Jung-woo confirms that he has, once after an accident. According to the test results obtained at that hospital, he was compatible with an F12 compound and was selected for the clinical trial. The doctor says this very close to the boy, and he looks up embarrassed, asking why they're meeting at such an hour of the night. She says it's because of the medication he took. One of the proteins in the F12 compound is a strong sedative, but it's also a compound that can create specific knowledge for those who use it. They mix this bihelical structure, which can be sold as medication. Han Woo specialized in business administration, not pharmacology. Dr. Moon corrects him, saying it's molecular biology. Jung Woo feels quite embarrassed for not understanding very well what she was talking about. The woman begins to lose a bit of patience, but says she'll explain again. She explains that Fu12 is a structure like a mirror of two molecules, and this is called chirality or optical isomerism, where one molecule has a spin in one direction and the other molecule is similar but spins in the opposite direction. She says that if this isomerism doesn't occur, the sedative starts to take effect. If it does, the compound that releases knowledge to the user begins to act. Han Jung-woo knows nothing about chirality and is quite confused by her explanation. Suddenly, he starts to feel a strong headache and says out loud that he doesn't understand this time. Still with a terrible headache, he asks why they are still there and why he isn't asleep yet. Dr. Moon wants him to think about his knowledge. The two remain silent for a moment, looking at each other in a strange way, until Han Jung-woo breaks the silence, asking for permission to speak and wondering if the doctor is just messing with him. As he leans back with an arrogant expression, how could a sedative through optical isomerism suddenly become a compound that gives information to a human being? He raises his voice and asks if it's really possible. He continues, stating that genetic engineering in studying changes at the molecular level is so important that it should be used in the Genome Project. Also, understanding genetic engineering isn't possible naturally unless you had several devices in your head. The doctor agrees that naturally it is impossible. With great confidence, Han Jung-woo says that it's true, it's impossible. The way the genetic code turns into amino acids is through RNA, and the way it recognizes these amino acids is quite complex. Suddenly, even Jung-woo can't understand where all this knowledge is coming from. He had never heard this in his chemistry classes. Dr. Moon has a sweet smile on her face. Jung-woo asks what is happening, since he has always had difficulty talking to girls and now spoke with such confidence. The woman gets his attention, places a vial on the car's dashboard, and says the knowledge he now possesses is only a small portion. She places a vial with a small, shiny, very blue stone inside. Jung-woo examines it closely and asks what is inside the vial. After a moment, he asks again what it is. Dr. Moon says it's the original AF-12, more stable than traditional medicines, and it will give him even more knowledge. He asks if it's dangerous, and she responds that it's 100% safe. The boy asks what she will do to him if he takes it, and if this is human experimentation. Suddenly, a macabre thought crosses his mind. He can't believe it. Is she going to dissect him? She says that if he's concerned about side effects, the legal department can compensate him for any physiological effects, even putting it in a contract. He says that's no guarantee at all and thought it was just a kind of vitamin. But how does he have all this knowledge now? Director Moon interrupts and says she's going to hire him. Han is very surprised by the proposal and doesn't understand it very well. The doctor asks him to please join KG Industries, even calling him sir. Han can't even believe what's happening. The woman smiles at him while holding the papers and tries to understand the whole situation. A devastating fire consumes a place, while a child inside struggles to breathe and is terrified. Feeling immense pain and not knowing where he is, the flames grow higher and the blaze reaches toward the ceiling. Hopeless, the boy tries to call for his father, and it seems like another nightmare. Elsewhere, someone wakes up with adrenaline pumping, sweating, and breathless. Han, now with white hair and different eyes, tries to understand what kind of dream that was and how disturbing it was. He remembers the previous night and everything that happened. Glancing at the table, he sees a piece of paper. It's the employment contract. It seems hard to believe, but the boy begins to realize that it wasn't a dream. Dr. Moon continues explaining that the clinical trial will help with research and that the goal was to hire field researchers, but he would only start as an intern. Han, suspicious, comments that they expect him to just accept this job, stating that he's too busy and has no free time to waste. The woman's eyes show disbelief upon hearing this. Jung-woo feels a sense of regret after uttering such words because it was a dream opportunity. Dr. Moon, mercilessly, says that since he graduated, he's never had a job, his house doesn't have internet, and he doesn't pay taxes. Under these conditions, it would be impossible for him to find a job, and the boy agrees. Even so, a 20% salary increase is offered because they need someone who'd take the AF-12. The boy does the math and realizes his salary would be approximately 400 rise per year. With a 20% increase, his monthly income would be close to 40 rise. He doesn't understand how anyone would pay so much money just to take a medicine and confirms if he would really receive that amount upon taking it. Doctor Moon confirms but warns that if he fails to adapt to the job, he'll be sued for losses and for interrupting the clinical trial. Still thinking about what to do, he questions whether there will be any side effects, but no effect could be worse than his current situation. The boy then puts the compound in his mouth and swallows it all. Time passes and he receives an amount of approximately 20 Ryas on his phone. Now with white hair, he thinks he can survive for a while with the money he has. Suddenly, he notices that his hair has changed color and realizes he hadn't noticed it before. Surprised by how quickly the change happened, he wonders how safe this drug really is. Suddenly, he starts to remember more details from the previous night. After taking the medication, he heard the doctor's voice from afar asking how it went and if the universe seemed different to him. The doctor keeps calling his name and he seems to see everything through the lens of a microscope. A microscope so powerful that it allows him to see even atoms. Dr. Moon keeps calling him and he slowly starts to come back from this microscopic vision he had acquired. The woman asks if there's something wrong with her face. He says no, but hesitates a little and comments that actually her skin looks strange. His eyes glow with a different color and he can see oxidation of iron and oxygen. The question makes the doctor very uncomfortable. He begins to explain that the path is from iron to oxygen, becoming ferrous oxide. He starts to see the combinations of elements, the silicons combining with oxygen, the carbons and hydrogens forming a kind of glycolic acid. She asks if he's talking about cosmetic ingredients. He doesn't know anything about cosmetics, so he finally starts to realize that these elements were shining on the doctor's face. He says that the iron dioxide and silicone present in the crow's feet around the doctor's eyes were scattered, but now they could come together. So her anti-wrinkle cream really worked. Very proudly, the woman responds that she doesn't apply any of that to her skin. He comments that he can see everything. She asks what he's looking at and if he has any idea what 2 sleepless nights of work do to a woman's skin. He remains fascinated by the reactions happening on Dr. Moon's skin. She asks if he's even listening to her. He replies that he's seen some strange things after taking the medication. She explains that it's the effect of the AF12 substance and that there's nothing strange. It's just knowledge that he doesn't yet understand. He wants to know what the exact knowledge contained in the drug is. She says it's the knowledge acquired by someone who is an authority in molecular biology. He asks if it's someone like Dr. Moon, but the answer is no, as she's not a chemist, only a doctor working on the project. She reveals that the owner of all this knowledge is a very special chemist. Jung-woo says he'd like to meet him at least once. In a direct tone, the woman says that's impossible and that he just needs to do what's in the contract and produce results. The boy can't fully understand because he's still fascinated by the new world around him. He goes back to talking about the doctor's skin, saying she can't just cover it with foundation. He suggests that for a more fundamental solution, she should add an acid catalyst to remove the dead skin cells. Moon becomes very angry at this, tells him to stop talking immediately, and even breaks the pen in her hand out of rage. The boy composes himself and swallows hard. The sky is bluish and the creak of a door breaks the silence of the neighborhood. Han opens the door to his apartment and the noise is very loud. This makes him realize that he'll need to buy some lubricant. Finally, he's found at home. A voice surprises the boy with these words. An older woman asks if Jung-woo is heading to another interview. He replies no. The woman in a harsh tone says that he never gets called for any interviews. She also reminds him that bills need to be paid and that she needs the rent today. The boy asks her to wait a moment and quickly grabs his phone to make a transfer. The landlady's phone rings and she asks him to verify if everything is correct. She's shocked by the amount of money that was transferred. Han says he needs to go now. The old lady thanks him and asks where he's going so early. With a smile on his face, he says that he has a job. The morning train runs as usual and is quite full. Han holds on to a small support handle and feels a very strong electric shock that even hurts his hand. He shakes his hand to see if the pain goes away and groans. With his new way of seeing the world, he can observe what's happening in the palm of his hand. He starts to focus more and more of his microscopic vision on the tip of his finger and can see his own finger. More than that, he notices the subtle movement of electrons and says they look like tiny clouds of dust like stars. He wonders where those electrons want to go. Han firmly grips a metal support, watching closely as the electrons travel through the metal bar. He observes them climbing up to the overhead support above the. Han comments that now the electrons are free and tells them not to create static electricity while they run around. But the electrons seem to be attracted to the palm of his hand. He tries to shake them off with the movement of his hand and wonders why they keep sticking to him. The people around him start to find it strange that the boy is talking to himself and moving his hand that way. Very embarrassed, the boy tries to pretend he was just fanning himself. He begins to look at the outfit he prepared for his first day of work, commenting that he doesn't own any suits, all the ones he was wearing were borrowed. Suddenly, he begins to see more electrons, but he calls them stardust, mixing in a strange way. He notices how everyone's clothes are charged with electrons and comments that all this charge is starting to concentrate in one place and is ready to create a spark at any moment. Noticing that the electrons are moving from people's clothes to the objects around them. He's amazed at the number of electrons on people's clothes and begins to notice the patterns formed by them, how these particles are distributed inside the train car. The electrons gather around the people and seem to shine before his eyes. He sees a man talking on his phone behind him and moves away because the electrons seem to be concentrated near that man. They form a kind of whirlpool of his hand. Han tries to push them away with his hand, but the electrons start flying in a strange pattern and continue to move through the train car, passing between people and heading to the back of the car. Han comments that it's like a group of stardust moving and wonders where all the electrons are going. Suddenly, a few people at the back of the car catch his attention. Some girls are sleeping in the back, but one of them is reading a piece of paper. Looking closer, he notices that one of the girls fell asleep while reading. He's amazed by the beauty of this woman, fixing his gaze on her for a moment. He thinks about how beautiful she is and notices that the girl starts to open her eye. The electrons begin to gather in her hair and accumulate on her clothes in an excessive way. This starts to worry Han because it seems like there's a large concentration of electrons on her. Suddenly, a child begins to cry very loudly, and the mother asks the boy to calm down and stop crying. A man notices the situation and rudely tells the woman to make the boy be quiet. The mother starts apologizing. This catches the girl's attention. The mother keeps apologizing, but the boy continues to wail. At this, the girl in the pink sweater puts away the paper she was reading and places it in her bag. The mother keeps apologizing. An old man clears his throat while reading his newspaper and comments that the boy has already grown. He says the boy should have shown more manners in public, and that this is the government's fault for no longer teaching morality and civics in school. The old man keeps grumbling but returns to reading. Without saying anything more, he continues reading his newspaper. The boy wipes his tears. Jung-woo follows the flow of the electrons, noticing that they begin to accumulate in the hat of the boy who was crying. Before the electrons concentrate there, he passes his hand over the boy's hat to redirect them to the grumpy old man, and the electrons follow the course Han set. The charge is so strong that the old man starts to stand up. Jung-woo's hand is still charged with electrons, so he realizes that he has the power to attract electrons to his body. He begins to test this on the old man's hair, and the crying boy notices. What Jung-woo wants, he can pull the electrons from the man's head, making the old man's hair stand on end. He also finds it strange that sodium silicate doesn't stain his hair. Suddenly, the old man begins to notice something strange and looks up. Jung-woo quickly puts his hand in his pocket and tries to act casual by looking away. The boy stares at Jung-woo as if he saw everything, but Jung-woo asks him to stay quiet. The boy nods in agreement. Jung-woo realizes that his hand was acting like a positive pole and theorizes that he could change it to a negative. He thinks that the old man's hair standing up and the tingling sensation people feel when they're scared are all bioelectric responses. If these currents could be controlled, couldn't he condense all this energy to generate an electric discharge in the palm of his hand? Jung-woo tries to summon some kind of power and realizes that it's not possible, or at least not as easy as he imagined. The electrons begin to gather in the palm of his hand, which surprises and astonishes him because the buildup of electrons is quite large. He's very impressed and wonders if what's happening in front of him is what they call chemical control of the senses. Not believing that he has this kind of ability, he questions whether it's an effect of the drug he took. He then starts testing his abilities by first pulling the electrons from the old man's head, making his hair stand up. However, the old man doesn't have much. Jung-woo jokes that maybe the man is bald because he's so stressed. The boy in the hat laughs while Jung-woo pulls the old man's hair from side to side. The guy next to him notices too, and everyone laughs at Jung-woo's prank. The old man is confused about what's happening, and unbeknownst to Jung-woo, someone films the entire situation. The boy keeps laughing as the old man disembarks at the station. The boy asks Ham Jung-woo to perform more magic tricks. Han steps aside a bit on the train. Suddenly, the girl who had previously caught his attention asks for permission to speak and asks if he's going to KG Chemical. Surprised, Jung-woo asks how she knows. Before he even finishes the question, the girl reveals that she also works at the company. The train tracks vibrate heavily as they pass through the city, but this constant vibration begins to loosen some bolts. These bolts fall to the ground unnoticed. The girl shows that someone at the company mentioned there would be a new employee and had Jung-woo's pick. She calls him Mr. Parachute for getting into the company so suddenly, likely through a recommendation from a superior. The girl comments that his hair color is different and asks if he's really Jung-woo. He confirms that it's him and is surprised because the girl seems too young to be a company employee. Suddenly, something catches his attention and he begins to sense that something sinister is about to happen. The sweater the girl is wearing is highly prone to generating a large static charge due to the friction between its fibers. That nylon and its chemical composition are similar to other fabrics, giving the fabric that appearance of clinging to the skin. Jung-woo begins to think that there could be the possibility of an electrostatic bond forming. He considers that sodium with oxygen and silicone turns into sodium silicate, and that all these electrons together with the sodium silicate could form such a bond. Jung-woo thinks that to neutralize the static electricity, he just needs to throw a little water. The girl keeps commenting on his now white hair, saying it's quite strange. She also mentions that the company is pretty casual when it comes to appearance, especially considering it's his first day. With a girl of those to grab the handrail, he warns her to be careful with static electricity, but it's too late and she gets shocked. He asks if she's okay, and she responds that she is, adding that this is why she hates winter. She quickly turns to him with a surprised look, starts thinking about what just happened, and asks how he knew about the static electricity. Jung-woo stays silent, preferring not to answer. She continues wanting to know more, but the two are interrupted by a loud noise from outside. The conductor notices that an object has fallen onto the tracks. There are some metal beams just ahead, right in the middle of the train's path. The conductor even rubs his eyes because this could be serious, and when he realizes they're actually metal beams, he becomes very alarmed. The girl still wants to know how Jung-woo controlled the static electricity with his hands and made the old man's hair move. Jung-woo tries to start explaining, and her eyes widen with anticipation, but they're interrupted as the train suddenly brakes hard to avoid hitting the beams at high speed. The sound of the train's brakes is deafening, but it's to prevent an accident, causing a massive jolt to the passengers inside the car. The girl lets Jung-woo lose her balance and falls on him. Since her sweater was electrically charged and so was he, they both suffer a strong shock and pull away. He knew this would happen, but didn't expect it to be so painful. Suddenly, the train shakes violently, causing the girl to lose her balance again. Quickly, Jung-woo catches her in his arms, preventing her from falling. They stay in that position for a while, and she begins to notice something in his hand. Meanwhile, he focuses on the announcement about a part of the bridge having fallen, locking the train tracks. This is why the train had to stop. The passengers are confused about what they heard and become a little nervous. The announcement reassures them that the bridge wasn't damaged, Only the debris needs to be removed from the tracks, which shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. This calms the passengers. The girl starts to feel a bit uncomfortable being in his arms and calls him Mr. Parachute. He quickly responds, asking what she needs, and she says he can let her go. Realizing the situation, he awkwardly steps away from her, a bit embarrassed, and clears his throat. The girl is also embarrassed by the situation and looks straight ahead, trying to hide it. Both avoid eye contact and continue staring straight ahead. Soon, the debris begins to draw attention, and Jung-woo tries to identify which part of the structure fell. He notices that the other trains heading in the opposite direction seem fine, but the train he's on is still stopped. Meanwhile, they both wait patiently for the tracks to be cleared. The workers are working hard to remove the debris. Suddenly, Jung-woo spots where a beam might have fallen and notices the rust stain left where the beam should have been. With this special vision, you can almost see the surface of the support where the beam was. These details rush into Han's brain so quickly that it makes him a little dizzy from processing so much information while in motion. When they arrive at the station, he wonders if what he saw was silicate, because if it was sodium silicate in that spot, it would be a sign that a lot of electricity had been there. Lost in thought, he begins to understand the function of polycarboxylic acid and notices traces of zeolite, a porous substance. He realizes that if all these elements were together, they would act like a detergent. While he's thinking about this, the girl starts approaching him. Hearing him think loud, she asks if he still thinks there's laundry detergent on her clothes, and Jung-woo comments that there's no significant amount. She laughs and tells him to watch as she shakes her sweater, making small particles fall from it. Jung-woo jokes that detergents are also used in dry cleaning, poking fun at her, and finishes by saying she must have dumped a bucket of detergent when washing her clothes. This showed her skill in such tasks, but the girl feels offended by the comment. He tries to pretend she's not angry at him by continuing to talk about the properties of electrostatic ionization and that the details are secrets. She retorts that it's all nonsense and asks if he uses that kind of talk to flirt with girls. She says he seems like a playboy, since he hugged her earlier without even knowing her. Jung-woo explains that he only did that because she almost fell, but she retorts, accusing him of taking advantage of the situation to hug her. He gets a little nervous and comments that she's being a bit rude and that this is too much for their first date. She then asks if he joined the company through a recommendation from Dr. Chien-sung Cook and if he is one of his students. The boy starts to recall that name, remembering that Dr. Moon mentioned that the information about F-12 was a secret. The doctor had said that if anyone asked how he knew so much about chemistry, he should say he studied with Dr. Chien-sung Cook. So he replies that yes, he is one of his students. The girl asks where the doctor is and if he's doing well, saying she always wanted to meet him but never had the chance. He responds that he doesn't know either, and she keeps pressing him for information on where the doctor is. Jung-woo says the doctor is fine somewhere. But this leaves the girl frustrated, and she says all right, fine, though she looks somewhat confused. Song Bo-young reluctantly says it's okay and comments that she applied for a position on Dr. Cheen's project, but was always told there was no room for her. Yet apparently there was space for Han, and she wonders why she wasn't accepted. However, Han is lost in his own thoughts. Now, with a bit more confidence, he's able to talk to other girls. He makes a joke playfully while the girl in front of him fumes about the doctor. Then he says he can hear everything she's saying, and she responds that she's speaking for him to hear. He asks why he should listen to her, and she starts walking, saying that he's her rival. The two walk quietly toward the escalator, and Han Jung-woo notices a buildup of electrons on the handrails. He sees the electrons moving toward the girl. He warns her to be careful, but she doesn't fully understand what he means. As she leans on the handrail, she gets shocked by the static electricity. The charge is so intense that she lets out a few gasps and seems to lose her balance, falling backward. Han catches her at the last moment by her hands in a very romantic manner. Their eyes meet. The girl is very surprised. They stare at each other for a while. The girl is still astonished by the boy's gesture, The two remain holding hands on the escalator, looking at each other until the buildup of energy begins to pass from her hand to his. He notices this with his special vision. Then he avoids the particles, letting go of her hand, saying he already told her they can't do that. She thanks him, saying thank you, but only this once. Not understanding why she's angry, he replies, "You're welcome." The two continue ascending the escalator, still looking at each other. Jung-woo asks for a moment and checks his phone. Dr. Moon sent him a message reminding him to stop by Human Resources. She mentions that because he was higher in a special way, many people might not treat him well, but he'll soon prove his worth with his special abilities. Jung-woo comments that it's his first day, so he can't be late. He says it was nice meeting her and calls her Ms. Boo-young. She replies that it was nice meeting him too, calling him Mr. Parachute. He shouts to her as she leaves, saying they need to deal with the electrostatic bomb issue, and she responds, of course. As he runs off, he shouts something else, that she should have her clothes cleaned by a professional. The girl says she'll remember that, and has nothing more to say. Still at the train station, she watches the boy and feels as strange melancholy as she watches him leave. Jung-woo is surprised by the size of KG Chemicals. He had never seen anything so grand, and he spends a moment admiring the magnitude of the structure. He slaps his own face to maintain focus and stay awake. Then he lets out a spirited shout to start his first day. The receptionist hands him an identification card, explaining that he'll need it to access different areas of the building. The boy is surprised by the kind of access he's been given, thanks the woman, and examines the card as she leaves the room. Another person enters the room and calls him. He turns around and sees the badge of the employee calling him. A man with red hair invites him to approach the door. The employee greets him, and the boy returns the greeting, introducing himself as Ba Gi-tae from Team 1 of Jonghyun. Ba says it's good to have a new employee there and asks which university Jung-woo attended. Jung-woo thanks Gi-tae and says he attended Myeonglan University, but Gi-tae finds the name of the university strange and asks what master's degree he completed. The boy responds that it was in business administration, which catches Ba's attention since he doesn't have a master's degree in the scientific field. Ba comments that he really is a parachute in the company, making the employee suspect that Jung-woo got in through nepotism. Just then, a man calls out to Gi-tae. This man, wearing a lab coat, asks how the evaluation is going. Ba thanks the man in the classes for his concern, who then remarks about how politely Ba is flattering him. Observing all this, Han remains silent. The man in the classes points to Jung-woo and asks if he is the new intern, introducing himself as Lee Dong-go, leader of Team 1 of Jonghyun. Lee asks if the boy has any experience in the field of research, and Jung-woo replies that he doesn't. Lee asks if he has at least interned in the chemistry department. Jung-woo shakes his head again. Lee begins to question him further, asking if he has initiated any independent research, done any exchanges, or what his professional qualifications are. Jung-woo swallows hard and can't respond, so Lee bluntly asks what he can do, as he must be capable of something since he was directly recommended by Dr. Chin. Gi-tae thinks his suspicion is confirmed. How else could he have gotten the job? The boy responds that it's not his specialty, but he's studying molecular biology. Han says he doesn't have that knowledge and is more focused on molecular recognition. The researcher finds it odd and asks if the boy is studying molecular recognition on his own. Jung-woo is left speechless. Lee continues to explain that the lab requires close interactions since the members are from various professional levels. He comments that it's easy to fit in, but that everyone is responsible. Gi-tae agrees, and the man in the classes continues, saying they don't need a researcher who is desperate for the job and could be cut from the company. Lee also mentions that doesn't know the boy well. He can't introduce him to the other department. Jung-woo agrees with that. Lee goes on to say that he'd like Jung-woo to participate in managing and evaluating the research that will be conducted in the coming weeks. Gi-tae is surprised and asks if Mr. Jung-woo will be involved as well. Lee questions if he can't handle it or if he isn't confident enough, adding that it makes sense to participate since the newcomers have been preparing for this for 3 months. Jung-woo remains thoughtful but finally says he'll try, sounding very confident in his words. This confidence makes Dr. Lee's eyes light. Lee comments that once the boy has chosen a path, he should turn it into a real project and do his best. He tells Gitae that this new employee is no different from any other intern and asks the red-haired employee to show the company and the basics to the new intern. Gitae responds that it's fine and that he'll show the company to the boy. The two walk down the corridors of the building with Gitae leading the way. He mentions that the meeting room is just around the corner and keeps walking ahead of Jung-woo. Jung-woo notices several basic materials along the way and notes that the laboratories and offices are side by side. They pass by various microscopes and solutions being analyzed. Several people are working at their lab benches discussing their experiments. One room has 2 women discussing results displayed on a computer. Gitae stops at a door and Jung-woo assumes it must be the office inside. Gitae says the others haven't arrived for the meeting yet, so he suggests that Jung-woo rest for a bit. Left alone, Ham takes a moment to observe the space. He places his bag on a table and sits down to catch his breath. He notices there are already several other backpacks in the room, making him wonder when the others will arrive. Time passes and no one comes. A few more minutes go by until someone finally enters the room. A man walks in and asks why the others are gathered outside so early. He hadn't noticed Jung-woo's presence, but when he does, they greet each other. Suddenly, the man recognizes him and becomes startled. The man then runs out of the room, saying he has something important to do, leaving Jung-woo confused. He is alone in the room again until another person enters and Jung-woo greets them. At the same moment, the person's phone rings and they read the message in front of Jung-woo. They turn to him and ask if he is who they think he is. Without waiting for a response, they turn away and leave. Another person enters and upon seeing Jung-woo, they stare at him awkwardly for a while. Jung-woo is left confused when someone suddenly apologizes and quickly leaves the room. He can't understand what's going on until he sees a message from Dr. Moon informing him that it's the company's recruitment period, which will continue until the end of the year. She suggests he get used to the environment. Jung-woo feels a bit nervous about the whole situation. Suddenly, he hears footsteps approaching the room. A girl with blue hair enters and asks where the others are. Jung-woo recognizes her as Ms. Boo Young. He tells her that the others are probably in the hall. The girl notices that Jung-woo is alone. Turning her attention to him, she calls him Mr. Parachute. Han Jung-woo sends a message on his phone when he realizes that someone has entered the room. He is surprised when Boo Young calls for his attention and asks if they've met before. He says yes, finding the question odd since they had just met recently. Chien, in the Heidelberg. Jung-woo responds that he doesn't know, and Boo Young comments that it wasn't a hard question, yet he couldn't answer it. She analyzes him closely. He suggests that maybe she's preparing for the evaluation next week. She doesn't understand what he means and wonders why she would do that. He asks if she isn't with the new interns. The girl laughs and mischievously asks why an intern would act that way toward a superior. Han Jung-woo starts to understand the situation. She explains that she is often mistaken for an intern because she looks so young. Even Dr. Cheen used to say she looked like a doll. She asks who he thinks placed first in last year's evaluation. He asks if it was Ms. Boo Young, and she confirms that he's right, saying that on that day even Dr. Cheen congratulated. The girl becomes enthusiastic with the arrival of new people in the room and turns to greet them. Kitae is organizing a line and asks them to enter ahead of him. Boo Young calls all the interns to gather near her and welcomes everyone, including those who fell from the sky. This comment makes everyone a bit nervous. Jung-woo introduces himself for the first time, saying that he'll be starting as a member of the Central Research Institute. A woman introduces herself as Jo Sung-won and says she'd heard from Kitae that Jung-woo has a master's in business administration. She asks if it's true, and Jung-woo confirms. Jo questions if maybe he got the wrong position, but he firmly responds that he did not. Then she asks if he didn't want to join Human Resources, and again he replies that he didn't. She asks what he's doing there. With great conviction and a serious demeanor, Jung-woo says that his goal is to become a scientific researcher. All the newcomers fall silent and glance at each other. Jung-woo feels embarrassed by how he spoke and begins to rephrase his sentence. He then says that if he wants to be a researcher, he will help with the Central Research Institute's project and will be under the guidance of his superior. She finds his response odd, but tells him to do his best. Boo Young calls him Mr. Parachute and asks if he really did his in business administration and how that was possible, or if perhaps he has another master's degree or met Dr. Chin during a research project. She begins listing various possibilities. A centrifuge spins with several vials inside. As the numbers flash on the screen showing the conditions of the prepared substances, Jung-woo repeats. He memorizes the numbers and inputs them into the computer to produce a substance with extreme precision. He continues repeating the numbers and entering them into the computer. The boy notices that he needs olefin to produce plastic, so he grabs a small vial from the centrifuge. Olefin is a mixture derived from petroleum refinement, and a catalyst is needed to break down the hard olefin. He closes the centrifuge and continues counting while entering the numbers into the computer. Meanwhile, the centrifuge keeps running and Jung-woo keeps typing and memorizing the number. Later, he heads to lunch. There he eats until he's full, saying he's really excited about his new job since it's been a while since he's eaten like. He realizes he ate too much and notices some people playing soccer nearby. The sound of the game catches his attention. He stops for a moment to watch while drinking coffee and soon notices a girl sitting on a nearby bench reading a book. The girl is wearing a pink dress and a white lab coat, also sipping on coffee as she reads. The sky is blue and the day is beautiful, making Jung-woo feel quite happy. Jung-woo finds eating inside the lab more relaxing and elegant than he imagined. He's interrupted by someone asking what he's doing there alone. It's Boo Yeon, and she says she asks if she can sit next to him, and before he even responds, she's already sitting. Jung-woo begins drinking his coffee quickly, trying to leave before another interrogation begins. But in his haste, he chokes on his coffee. The girl notices but says nothing, simply excusing herself while he tries to catch his breath. His eyes are still watery, and she starts talking about Dr. Chin. Jung-woo interrupts her, respectfully calling her ma'am, and asks why she wants to do research with Dr. Chin. She doesn't understand why he's asking, as Dr. Chin is likely to be the next Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. When someone wins a Nobel Prize, the co-producers of that research also gain the same recognition. Now he understands that. Some of Dr. Chin's papers are still a mystery to German chemists. She mentions that some researchers fully accept his theory and adds that she has read all of Dr. Chin's papers and is probably the only one in Korea who has. She understands the principles behind his research. Suddenly, something catches Jung-woo's attention on Boo Yeon's lips. With his special vision, he is able to focus very well. He starts noticing a substance on her lip, getting closer and closer until he can see the cells there. His eyes have a different glow and he identifies lentiline on her lips. Boo Yeon doesn't understand what he's talking about. He tells her there's lentiline on her lips, and the girl is startled, thinking her mouth is dirty, and begins wiping it, but finds nothing there. She asks if he's joking. The boy mentions that lentiline smells like shiitake mushrooms, suggesting she must have eaten mushrooms for lunch, and also mentions cucumber alcohol. He asks if he's right, and the girl is surprised and wants to know how he knew that. She comments that he's very similar to Dr. Chin and asks if he knew that. Jung-woo says he doesn't need to share everything he learned from Dr. Chin, since they are rivals after all. Boo Yeon agrees. Jung-woo mentions that only 3 co-producers are allowed in research. She confirms that he's right. This leaves her a bit discouraged and deep in thought, staring ahead, lost in her own reflections. Han finishes his coffee and says he needs to go now, snapping Boo Yeon out of her distracted state. As he's about to leave, she calls him again, asking if he has anything planned for the afternoon. Jung-woo replies that Team 3 asked him to help with an experiment and they'll be taking shifts for an hour, as it's an experiment that needs to be monitored and they don't have time this afternoon. The girl continues watching him, realizing she'll have to try again tomorrow. Jung-woo goes back to working on the centrifuge, repeating the numbers and entering them into the computer. The task is becoming repetitive and it's making him very sleepy. But he continues to focus on his work. Though the sheer number of digits starts to confuse him and he begins forgetting everything due to exhaustion until someone calls out from afar saying he's doing a good job, but that it's time to end the shift and he can leave. The man starts reviewing Jung-woo's work and comments that he's doing everything very well without needing any intervention. He also says that Jung-woo is quite smart and that he's excited to work with him from now on. When the man mentions from now on, it makes Jung-woo a little nervous. The man gives him a thumbs up. Jung-woo finally leaves the room, feeling very tired. He heads to the lounge where the other interns are and notices they're all still working. When he enters the room, no one even looks at him. His bag is still on the chair where he left it. The boy sits at the table with the others. Jung-woo wonders if everyone is working overtime and notices on a colleague's computer that they're preparing for the evaluation. He starts looking for an outlet to plug in his laptop but can't find one. He comments that his laptop is old and that the battery doesn't last long, continuing to search for an outlet somewhere when his phone vibrates. It's a message from Dr. Moon, asking why he hasn't clocked out yet and mentioning that she would like to meet with him. Jung-woo grabs his bag and tells his supervisor he's leaving, expecting a response. But when he looks over, the woman simply waves at him. Jung-woo bows again as a sign of respect and wonders if his relationship with his co-workers will improve soon. In the elevator, the speaker announces that the Research Institute helps society gain a better understanding of medical care, especially in the bioeconomy and biopharmaceutical fields. To become a company with a global presence, KG Chemicals is actively producing new research. The boy arrives at his desired floor, and as he exits the elevator, he meets Dr. Moon. She's wearing glasses and making some notes on a tablet. She looks at him and with a smile invites him to come in. Jung-woo feels happy to be received warmly, something that's happening for the first time. The woman doesn't quite understand what he said, so she asks if he has the entry card for the lab, and he confirms by showing her the card. She comments that with that card, he'll be able to enter Dr. Chin Song's private research room. Dr. Moon explains that in that room are all the articles and research materials the doctor is currently working on or planning to work on. She also mentions that whenever he finishes work, he can go there to use the room. He begins to realize the importance of the space and understands that he'll soon start conducting research. Dr. Moon confirms that's exactly right. That will happen as soon as his trial period ends. She tells him that Dr. Chian's room is on the 25th floor. He asks if Dr. Moon will join him. She finds the question odd and asks why she would, since her specialty is medicine, not chemistry. She adds that if he continues the research, the two of them will be able to work together. The elevator doors close as Dr. Moon leaves. Jung-woo stands there, processing everything he just heard. Suddenly, a realization hits him. With some dread, he realizes that this means he'll have to work overtime every day. Soon, he arrives at the 25th floor and the card grants him access to the room. He's quite curious to see what's inside. Upon entering, he notices that the space is enormous, and he's surprised as it's the first time he's seen a private laboratory. He starts exploring all the rooms in the space, observing the equipment and materials available. He reaches Dr. Chin's office. Sitting in what is probably the doctor's chair, he comments that with a dual-screen computer, he'll be able to prepare his evaluation plan overnight. He opens the files and starts browsing through them, document by document, until he finds what he's looking for. The document is titled Benevolence Project, Well Balanced. Jung-woo notices that the title has nothing to do with chemistry and that the document was created in June of the same year, with no further entries after that. He realizes this was during Dr. Chian's son Cook's sabbatical period. As he flips through the file, a small note falls from it. The paper lands near Han's feet. On the note, it says that the preparation of AF5 compounds must be done carefully, as it will form the foundations of society. The name of the compound catches Han's attention because it's different from the one he took. Time passes and the boy is now on the subway, heading home. He's so tired that he takes a nap. In his sleep, he dreams that train is braking abruptly again, and he wakes up startled. Jung-woo hasn't been able to sleep well since starting his job. His work schedule has been ruining his sleep routine. He tells himself that he just needs to get through one more day, and then he can sleep as much as he wants since tomorrow is Saturday. He wonders if Dr. Moon will work this weekend and dreads the idea that he might have to work too. Suddenly, his phone rings. It's a message from his brother asking why he left home suddenly without telling anyone. It was their mother who had asked. Jung-woo replies that he's working part-time. His brother gets excited about the idea and asks if the salary is good and if Jung-woo can buy him a skin for his favorite game. Suddenly, Jung-woo remembers that he won't be paid for another month, so he responds by saying he might buy it, and his brother starts obeying their. His brother asks why, and Jung-woo says it's because he obeys her. In comparison to the delinquent Jung-woo, his brother is a model student and good-looking. The train continues toward the central station. Han Jung-woo's special vision activates when he notices something in the structure supporting the bridge. Jung-woo's gaze gets closer and closer and can define the molecular structure of the steel beam. However, he doesn't find anything to be concerned about, which makes him sigh with relief. But then, something else catches his attention. On the other side of the train car, looking out the window, he notices that some joints have a sort of rust. He wonders if this is dangerous, thinking that if the bridge collapses, the train to Ujeongbu will stop. He looks at the notices and sees the number of a particular maintenance center. He reflects for a moment on what to say and then sends a message to the subway administration, describing the exact point and explaining how corrosion on those bolts could cause a structural failure. He suggests that the company should inspect it. His phone vibrates, indicating that a message has arrived. The employee responds promptly, asking exactly where the issue he mentioned is. Jung-woo describes the location precisely, and shortly after he receives a message saying they will check it immediately, which gives him a sense of relief. Now he can enjoy the rest of his commute to work. When he arrives at the company's lab, he notices there are still no special assignments for him. Lately, he has only been called on to handle simple tasks. This gives him the opportunity to organize the data collected through Dr. Chin's research. However, as an intern, there are limits to what he can do. As Dr. Moon had previously warned him, they will need to quickly organize a research project in the near future, and next week's evaluation will be the starting point. Suddenly, Boo-young appears behind him and asks what he's working on. When she notices he's focused on synthetic resin, she asks if he's looking for a project for the basic materials. This surprises Jung-woo. He then asks if she needs help. She replies that help would be welcome as long as she doesn't expect anything in return. Then she says they should pretend nothing happened. But Jung-woo notices that her smile is fake, knowing that this favor will be repaid later. She then tells him to grab his things because they need to leave. He asks where they're going. She responds that it's somewhere nice, though it might only be nice for her. Then she asks if the other newer employees are still giving Mr. Parachute a hard time. She adds that if it's still happening, she'll speak to the junior employees. However, Jung-woo says he just doesn't feel comfortable around his colleague. Boo-young insists that she'll talk to the other interns. She gets excited and shouts that if he doesn't hurry up, she won't have the same know-how she had last year. Jung-woo starts running, thinking she was talking, but in fact, she was talking to Jae. He's already prepared to go with the two of them. Jung-woo realizes that he needs to be careful and avoid following in his superior's footsteps. Meanwhile, Jae seems uncomfortable. With the other employee present, he asks if Mr. Jung-woo will be joining them as well. Jung-woo confirms that he will. Meanwhile, Boo-young just signals them to follow. Jung-woo hopes nothing major happens since they're only going to City Hall. However, he's already feeling tired of being around Boo-young. As they walk, they discuss the presentation they're going to give, which showcases a study done last summer, where an anti-corrosion agent can be used on railways and bridge structures, as these are highly corrosive environments. The coating developed by Boo-young cannot even be painted over, which made the railway company very happy with the result. Jung-woo is impressed with her expertise, but she notices his distant look and asks what's wrong. He feels embarrassed because he was thinking about how smart she is and says it's nothing. However, Boo-young continues, lamenting that Dr. Chin hasn't even seen her research, so he couldn't give his feedback. She mentions that an intern at Osari ignored the research. Still, even the industry headquarters liked it, making it a very successful project. The girl's contributions were extremely important, and Jung-woo realizes that everything she does seems to revolve around Dr. Chin. Upon arriving at the city hall, one of the employees is amazed to realize that despite Boo-young's youthful appearance, she is actually superior to the others, even though she still looks like a university student. She explains that she is the deputy leader of the project and has also worked on railway constructions before. Moreover, she mentions that it's a common mistake to underestimate her just because she doesn't wear much makeup and thanks the employee for the compliment. Inside the city hall, a discussion begins due to an accident that occurred a few days ago, where some boards fell onto the train track. It was summarized that the cause of the accident was the increased traffic in the area. Thus, the Department of Transportation, in partnership with KG Chemicals, created a special coating as part of the solution to prevent future incidents. At this point, someone questions whether this research was truly worthwhile. Boo-young steps forward to address the issue. She introduces herself to everyone as Sam Boo-young, a researcher at KG Chemicals, explaining that the result of the research is a quasi-crystal coating. She explains that quasi-crystals are superior to Teflon and more resistant than steel. Boo-young clarifies that quasi-crystals are a quintessential refined compound used in defense installations by the U.S. Department of Defense. She asserts that if they choose to adopt this new product, the budget cost will be reduced by half. Everyone applauds while Jung-woo is impressed by her strong public speaking skills. The director of a rival chemical company, Yoon Jae-gul, then introduces himself and begins to speak. Jung-woo notices that Jae-gul holds a very high position, especially compared to the size of his company. Jae-gul continues, talking about a rust removal compound used to clean structures and paint over them, resulting in complete rust prevention. After an investigation, only 1% of the rivets connecting the steel columns came loose, and none of them were caused by rust. Jae-gul suggests that the likely cause was the vibration from automobile traffic. He then questions the need to add another coating on top of an already perfect iron structure, stating it would be a waste of money. Additionally, he addresses Boo-young directly, questioning her mention of the United States, and asks whether the methods used to clean the rust off the Statue of Liberty are the same used for this railway, and whether the production of the rust remover is truly cost-effective. We return with Boo-young explaining that the zinc paint used has quality recognized by NASA, and due to its cost-effectiveness, buyers have been increased. However, Yoon still questions why they sent a relatively inexperienced researcher to discuss such an important matter. One of the researchers asks to talk about this later, as now is not the time. But Yoon Jae-gul complains that they don't want to hear the truth, and says he won't say anything further. Seeing the difficulty of discussing with those people, the protagonist feels pessimistic about achieving any results. Then he begins to notice the images on the screen. Looking at the entire structure of the components in the image, Ham Jung-woo manages to spot details that no one else had noticed. There was a very interesting molecular compound there that no one had detected. Afterward, the protagonist thinks about that seminar and how he doesn't want Boo-young to leave defeated. He then stands up and asks to check the photos displayed on the screen. Next, he asks if anyone can see what's special. He points to a scratch in the image and says it should be easy for them to guess the problem because there was pigeon droppings that managed to penetrate Eugen's chemical. We then see the condition of the bridge structure. Cars drive over it smoothly during the day. We return to the protagonist explaining the difficulties of cleaning those areas and protecting them from pigeons and. But Yoon responds that some scratches were expected, and that's why there are 3 layers of paint. The protagonist then counters, showing that there weren't 3 layers of paint where the screws were tight. He further adds, saying there's a management failure in the company as the entire structure relies on the screws. Yoon Jae-gul begins to doubt how the boy in front of him would know all of that, but the protagonist replies that he observed while passing by. Seeing that Yoon won't believe his words, the protagonist starts to speak in detail about the drink Yoon had the day before. Yoon then asks how he figured all that out. while Han Jung-woo is still trying to identify the drink's flavor. Even after this, it's still not enough for Yoon to believe that someone could see molecules with the naked eye. The two continue the argument, with the protagonist trying to show defects in the screws while Yoon remains skeptical of his words. Han Jung-woo then says he is not a comedian and subsequently closes his hypothesis. Boyoung appears concerned about his words, but he says he just told them the truth. But Boyoung says that's not the issue. Meanwhile, Yoon gets furious and begins asking who he is and where he came from. Then Han Jung-woo introduces himself as an intern at KG Chemical. Yoon is shocked to find out he's just an intern. After this, Ba Ki-dae tells the protagonist that he's dealing with an influential doctor and shouldn't worsen their relationship even if they're competitors. Simultaneously, we see a train passing over the bridge they built. Everything remains normal as the train crosses the bridge, until suddenly the nails begin to come loose. The entire bridge starts to collapse. Then part of it falls onto the street below. We return to Han Jung-woo and Boyoung arguing over whose fault it is that he's there. Simultaneously, we see Yoon reproaching himself for his recent behavior, until he receives a call informing him of an accident. Han Jung-woo watches him, curious to know what kind of person Yoon is. The person Yoon was talking to alerts him, saying that an unknown person had predicted everything and warned them well in advance. Yoon takes the number of the person who warned him about the accident and calls them. Then he asks if it was indeed them who reported the bridge problems that morning. Then the protagonist appears right in front of him, showing that he was the one who had warned the company well before everything happened. Yoon is stunned to discover that the boy he had underestimated was right all along. Soon after, there's Yoon humbly asking the protagonist to help him solve the problem, promising compensation for the work. Even Ba is surprised, wanting to know what kind of situation caused someone so stubborn to change so much in such a short time. Boyoung threatens Han Jung-woo to explain what was going on between him and Yoon. Han Jung-woo then explains that there was an accident on the bridge, and because of this, Yoon asks the protagonist to give him advice. Boyoung and Ba are shocked to hear this. Shortly after, the three are heading to the company car where they will conduct research on the bridge issues. Ba Kitty tries to ask to go with the protagonist, but Boyoung sends him home to watch the seminar. Ba Kitty insists again but is ignored once more. Thus, the two get in the car as Yoon introduces them to the team leader. After that, she is surprised to see that the two are from Yoon, then introduces the two to Joo-hana. The two greet her. Joo-hana immediately starts explaining everything that's been happening. She explains the location where the structure fell and what she thinks may have caused the bolts to come loose. Yoon asks what the protagonist thinks, and he quickly asks for a photo to figure out what might have happened. But Joo-hana doubts Han Jung-woo's capability, saying there's no way he could see with a naked eye. Yoon asks her to do what the protagonist requested. After getting the photos, the protagonist begins reporting possible corrosion issues in the structure. But Hana doesn't believe his words and asks him to look at the durability tests conducted. Han Jung-woo realizes it won't be easy to converse with her. He then starts wondering if he should talk about cosmetics to try to persuade her. He observes crumbs and a bit of coffee on Joo-hana's lips. He also notices that there's some saliva from someone else in her mouth. Thus, Han Jung-woo starts talking about seeing a lot of cat saliva in her mouth and suggests she must really like kissing her cats. Joo-hana doesn't believe he could know what she did before arriving and tells him not to jump to conclusions. Right after, the protagonist says she has two cats, and because of this, the enzymes in her mouth have several differences. He then mentions having a sort of chemical reasoning. Shortly after, he returns to the bridge issue and explains that he doesn't doubt the tests performed by the company. Then the protagonist says he noticed a big difference in the material of some bolts and detected varying corrosion levels among them. Thus, he concludes that many bolts were made using a different type of material. Hana looks for reasons why the bolts appear different from one another, while Yoon says it's impossible for the bolts to come loose from just external corrosion. The two continue discussing to try to find the cause until Hana considers the possibility of problems with the bolt manufacturing process. She then realizes that bolts are being made with different levels of mixed iron. Boyoung begins to draw the protagonist's attention while the others try to solve the issue. She then asks if the protagonist has already resolved the situation. Han Jung-woo starts showing off to Boyoung. After that, he begins thinking of calculating his consultation fee. Suddenly, he hears Yoon talking about a press conference. Yoon starts asking his boss to give him at least 15 days to fully investigate the cause of the problem. Shortly after, we see a square full of people and cameras. Meanwhile, Han Jung-woo remains in the car observing people preparing for the filming. Boyoung appears in front of him as she watches the people. She cheerfully says that the protagonist is going to appear on TV. Then Han Jung-woo tells her to be careful so that they don't tarnish KG Chemical's image in front of the cameras. Boyoung mentions that Dr. Chin has appeared on TV a few times and then tells the protagonist to act confidently in front of the reporters. We see Ba in his lab while the TV covers the bridge collapse. On TV, interview is playing with the driver who was at the scene when the bridge accident happened. Next, the interview with the manager of Yoon Chemical begins. He starts by apologizing to the drivers affected by the accident. Meanwhile, people start discussing what was happening and who was involved. Afterwards, Yoo Hana appears, promising to find solutions to avoid future issues and pledging to compensate those impacted by the accident. The interview continues with reporters asking about what measures the company will take from here. Shortly after, the protagonist arrives to give an interview. He then introduces himself to the reporters. We see that his office colleagues are also watching his interview. Han Jung-woo says they will have no difficulty finding the cause and solution to the bridge problem. The reporters question his capacity, nevertheless, to address the issue Lee and Yoon Chemical failed to find after 2 months of investigation. They then inquire as to whether such kind of accidents would be increasingly common. Han Jung-woo claims he is unsure about his management ability. By now, his colleagues observing are startled by his statements. Later that same day, we observe individuals walking toward the accident site at the railway. One tells the director they are walking across the railway bridge. Over the bridge area flies a drone. According to the press, the safety management team, including Han Jung-woo, is walking across the bridge for inspection. Boyoung, on the other hand, suffers with the frigid air. She claims she finds it difficult as it is already dark and quite chilly. Hearing her say, the protagonist advises her she shouldn't have followed him. She says then that she couldn't hold back when even the protagonist was moving forward. Still, her suffering from the cold just gets worse. Joo Hana also notes at the same moment that the protagonist is the only one looking ready. Not too long afterward, Han Jung-woo hands Boyoung his scarf to wear. Though Boyoung is worried, the protagonist says she needs it far more than he does. Boyoung then once more equates the protagonist with Dr. Chin. She claims the protagonist is likewise the kind person who worries about others, but Han Jung-woo merely advises her not to scratch her nose on his new scarf. Hearing this, Boyoung becomes irritated with Han Jung-woo. They therefore move toward the inspection place, till they are there and must down the stairs. Boyoung struggles with the cold winds and falls down the stairs. Therefore, they all get at the spot where the inspection would take place. They start their bridge examination down below the Han River Bridge. Han Jung-woo begins to watch the site while Boyoung is coldly suffering. He searches the bridge for flaws using his unique eyesight, till he comes onto an area within the joint. His activated sight lets him see everything within his reach. Then he asks Joo Hana to capture the spot he is pointing to. But he soon asks the camera to capture it personally, therefore he ends up snapping a picture of the area where he discovered a flaw. So ending his bridge inspection job. Boyoung comes back to the office shortly after, frozen from the cold. When Yoon inquires about the whereabouts of the others, she says they are under interview with me. Yoon probes the inspection findings right away. Boyoung, nevertheless, looks at the heater next by and walks over to warm up. She then answers on the inspection findings and notes the product they will use to guarantee no bridge issues for the following 3 years. Yoon grabs the chance to say he apologizes for his actions toward Boyoung. But Boyoung notes Yoon no longer refers to her Miss Pretty. She then assures him not to worry since she understands how to accept compliments and the moniker fits someone as beautiful as she is. She assures him thereafter that she won't miss the next argument. Yoon wonders whether the heroes will take part in the forthcoming debate among them. Since Yoon had never encountered someone with the kind of chemical awareness the heroes possess, Bo Yeom claims another person has the same intuition but is on vacation. About the bridge inspection, we witness Han Jung-woo and Joo Hana conducting an interview. While the protagonist compliments Joo Hana for her excellent management of reporters, she strives to simplify everything for them. As the protagonist turns back at Bo Yeom, who is waving at them, the reporters probe. He then advises the reporters he will have to go. Still, the reporters wouldn't let him leave and started probing both of them. Then Han Jung-woo starts to answer somewhat precisely on the causes and fixes they discovered to solve the bridge problem. He leaves the scene after his comment, leaving the reporters amazed with his ability for communicating. When Han Jung-woo compliments Bo Yeom on his interview, he feels she might be doing it for some secret agenda. She is wearing a different scarf at that moment, so he concludes she might have dirtied his scarf and is hence furious with him. Yoon approaches the protagonist inquiring as to whether he is already leaving. Han Jung-woo claims he should let team leader Joo know about his discoveries. He then inquires about his salary for his efforts, but he is let down to learn that the corporation will forward the money rather than straight to him. Yoon calls him one more time just before he was leaving. Following his internship, Yoo advises Han Jung-woo on thinking about working for Eugene Chemical. Not too long later, Bo Yeom inquires of Han Jung-woo about his intended Eugene membership. Han Jung-woo responds, suggesting she should be glad to have one of her rivals passed away. Bo Yeom says she is annoyed since he is performing better than her and that she should learn more going forward. But Han Jung-woo claims he would not impart knowledge to her, which makes her unhappy. Bo Yeom ends up seeming cute to the protagonist in her bitter attitude. Bo Yeom then pulls out her phone to respond to texts sent by Dong-il Sunbae. Dong-il Sunbae requests Bo Yeom to bring the protagonist to the team dinner in his communications. Not too long later, Han Jung-woo is introducing himself to the top executives of the restaurant. Sunbae Dong-il calls the protagonist Bo Yeom will be back among them. As the protagonist goes past the other staff members, they remark about his interview. Sunbae Dong-il gestures inartistically at him. Not too long afterward, Sunbae Dong-il asks whether the meeting with Eugene Chemical went smoothly. Bo Yeom answers right away that it did, starting their conversation as though Bo Yeom had resolved everything at the conference. Dong-il and Sunju. Bo Yeom understands she has much to tell her seniors. Dong-il starts berating the protagonist for acting so dangerously following Bo Yeom's justification. The two quarrel a little until Dong-il orders the protagonist to start acting while he is out. Dong-il, nevertheless, knows the protagonist can follow his own path as long as he has his micro-world vision. Everyone then picks back in eating and drinking. Now seated with two more of his seniors is Han Jung-woo. Starting the discussion, one of the seniors probes on how the protagonist is preparing for the evaluation. The two then discuss their projects and the evaluation till they observe Sunju is acting somewhat silently. Bo Yeom approaches the protagonist at the same moment he is drinking. Startled as she requests a small portion of his drink, Han Jung-woo. She replies she has a strong tolerance and the drink is really sweet, adding she already had plenty. Shortly later, he starts looking at the drink he is pouring for Bo Yeom and noting its molecules. He finds it unremarkable until something else grabs his eye. He wonders several things about the drink's composition until he chooses to give it a shot. The molecules start reacting in some sort suddenly. They then entirely shift without any reason. The molecular structure altered to what would be the reverse of what it was before, notes Han Jung-woo. Bo Yeom grabs the drink though, then sip it coolly without any trouble. She spits a small amount of the liquid out of suddenness. The protagonist questions whether he altered the molecules of the drink since she claims it became bitter. Then Han Jung-woo considers how he might have altered the chemical formula of the drink to produce a bitter rather than pleasant taste. He keeps modifying the chemical formula of the drink by repeatedly trying to use his power on it until he at last comes to the conclusion that he is able to change the nature of everything. One of the seniors questions Bo Yam and asks her to pour him a small amount of the drink. He drinks to prove Bo Yam is simply intoxicated. He claims the taste is excellent. Bo Yam argues it tastes bitter. She drinks the liquid once more later, and oddly it tastes sweet now. Not too long afterward, everyone bids farewell for travel. Bo Yam knows he's already near to his seniors when he sees Han Jung-woo bidding farewell. She gives the protagonist back the scarf right after. She says she will still take him to have coffee with her, and he answers fast, saying he will only go if she has no hidden motivations for it. She even offers a dinner with it, but the protagonist claims he simply wants the coffee. Then he asks whether she still has a sample of the quasi-crystal coating so he may paint an old gate. Bo Yam responds, nonetheless, that she should ask him to provide her his number, as there might be some at the Chang factory. Han Jung-woo grabs his phone to provide her his number. Bo Yam also requests his address so she may give the good to him. Then Han Jung-woo addresses her. She quickly gets her phone and starts jotting down the protagonist's address and phone number. Now, with the protagonist's contact, she experiences an unexpected surge in pleasure. She exits, though, wondering right away why she feels this way, and watches the protagonist through the window. At his house early the next day, the protagonist sleeps soundly. He considers it unusual, nevertheless, to have rose early on a holiday and not felt sleepy. He even worries about maybe becoming a workaholic. He wonders why Park Soo-chin is calling at that hour since he gets a call out of nowhere. Then he inquires of Soo-chin whether he gave him a call inviting him out for a drink. Soo-chin responds, nevertheless claiming he's busy since it's the end of the year. Soo-chin uses the chance to inquire as to whether the protagonist still wants a part-time work, but Han Jung-woo replies he no longer need it. Then he tells Soo-chin where he works right now. Soo-chin really yells in shock when learning the protagonist works at KG Chemical. Then Soo-chin confesses he stated the part-time job the protagonist would want to work at the event hosting his preferred group. This group is Girlfriend, saying he will get the opportunity to personally meet Yoldi. Han Jung-woo starts the part-time work right away. Han Jung-woo passes the time on the bus headed to the event on his phone. Then he decides to review the article from his most recent interview. His position as a corrosion specialist makes him really happy, but he notes that another piece is drawing far more interest. Online, a fast 1-minute film is drawing a lot of interest. When he opens the video, he discovers it centers on him during his subway test of newly acquired abilities, but he also notes that film missed his face. He doesn't mind much as he wasn't attempting to flaunt. He listens to the radio playing a tune as the travel carries on. His trip thus runs without problems till he gets to the event site. He finds his friend Soo-chin soon after arriving at the gathering. Soo-chin praises him for attending. Right after, he gives the protagonist a badge. When Han Jung-woo questions whether he will truly be able to collect Yoldi's autograph, Soo-chin says right away yes. Soo-chin presents the celebrity attendance list, though, so the protagonist may check whether he wants any further autographs. The protagonist counters, nevertheless, that he only knows his girlfriend. Surprised, Soo-chin probes if the protagonist even knows Yoon Ye-sol. Then Han Jung-woo claims he heard one of her old tunes. Walking to work, the two trade insults. Working already inside the event, the two start with transporting the sound equipment. Not too long afterward, the protagonist is relaxing from the taxing task. He observes the others working. Then he asks Soo-chin whether he will actually have close access to view the performance. Soo-chin says he will be eligible as long as he carries the team identification badge. Hearing this, he feels quite thrilled since he will have the opportunity to see Yoldi up close. Soo-chin still grumbles, nevertheless, because he hardly knows Yoon Ye-sol. Then the protagonist asks Soo-chin whether he is handling fireworks. Soo-chin affirms and adds that when the music starts playing, the fireworks will intensify the environment. Han Jung-woo questions Soo-chin about what he is carrying about. Su-chin answers by stating it's a test explosive with match-found component. Then Su-chin opens one of the packages and tosses the explosive powder into the fireworks, piques Han Jung-woo's interest as he activates his abilities to observe the powder's makeup. He then starts to note the makeup of that unique powder. Suddenly sparks emerge from it. The protagonist then begins to perceive those sparks' chemical microcosm. Su-chin cautions him he would get into problems if the director sees him like that, since he does not know why the protagonist is so fascinated by it. Then he begs the protagonist to wait as he gets something. Later, he takes inexpensive pyrotechnics for practice. Su-chin explains it's for rehearsal and they should practice so they won't be shocked by the sound during the performance. Han Jung-woo wants to know why they're doing that if the director is the one managing the fireworks. The protagonist once more wonders, nevertheless, whether what he is doing is indeed permitted. Su-chin becomes annoyed, shocking the protagonist with his too strong response, as he is absolutely competent of handling the fireworks. Su-chin smiles shortly after. Practically lunchtime is here. Su-chin so turns to resume his work while the protagonist starts watching the fireworks and notes an intriguing chemical composition in them. Han Jung-woo notes that every one of the pyrotechnics in the package has similar chemical makeup. He then names every kind of gunpowder required. Not too long later, he calls for Su-chin and then asks whether he may use one of the firework launchers. Not too long after, the two head off for lunch. Laying down to unwind, Han Jung-woo wonders how Su-chin came to know that location. Su-chin says he visited once more and that he discovered it some years ago. While Su-chin describes how the day goes faster when working with someone by his side, Han Jung-woo starts unwinding. Park Jung-woo, relaxing in such area, gets a wave of tiredness. Then he asks his pal whether the lunch break will finish quickly. Su-chin replies that their lunch break still lasts 1 hour and a half. The protagonist then claims he would nap for half an hour to relax, but his friend worries he might become sick napping in such a chilly environment. The protagonist sadly was asleep even before Su-chin could speak. To keep his pal warm, Su-chin then positions some heat packs close by. Later he exits the room to see the director. Park Jung-woo left alone in the room asleep. The protagonist begins reacting to the heat packs put close by shortly after. His face starts to burn from the heat packs suddenly, till he wakes up screaming. He grumbles about his friend leaving such hot packets so near, but he soon discovers his companion is no more there. He glances at the time fast and notes he still has some lunch break remaining. Then Han Jung-woo sips his coffee, wondering why he suddenly felt so drowsy. He hates cold liquids in winter, hence his coffee is already chilly, which shocks him. Placing the 2 heat packs close by his coffee, he gets the idea to warm it. Park Jung-woo chooses to use his skills to hasten the chemical reactions, hence raising the pack temperatures. He therefore controls the heating of his coffee to the ideal temperature he desired. He then sips his coffee before leaving, but when he hears someone walking into the room, he thinks it's his friend arriving. But he quickly discovers the person entering the room is stranger. The unknown girl searches for a seat. She then grabs her guitar to start singing in the middle of the room. Her song has a lovely, calm tune that enthralls even the protagonist. He must sadly go back to work. Then he walks over and asks the girl to pardon him, then clarifying his being there. The girl answers that she was already on her way out, even though she apologizes to the protagonist. Then he grabs the chance to mention he enjoyed her music even though he couldn't identify it. The girl looks taken aback, nevertheless, to find he knew no song. Han Jung-woo responds at this point saying he's not particularly musical. He then notes he's leaving the heat packs there so she could stay warm, but he says he's leaving so she can practice in peace. Once more, the girl phones him back. Turning to pay attention, Han Jung-woo she then begs him not to tell anyone she is there. Though he doesn't know the girl, the protagonist agrees right away. Then he advises her to replace the rusty lowest string of her guitar. He runs across his mate in the corridor, saying he was meant to wake him up, but Han Jung-woo tells him to stay quiet since he says a solo artist is using the space. Sujin recalls that that day Yoon Ye-seul is the only solo performer scheduled. Then he inquires of his companion whether he noticed the girl's face. Han Jung-woo answers fast, saying he spotted written on her guitar but not her face. His companion yells straight away that this is the guitar of Yoon Ye-seul. To someone who only wants Yoli's autograph, though, it makes hardly a difference. Sujin still finds it hard to understand his friend not knowing such a well-known performer. Then they move to Yoon Ye-seul, meeting her manager in the room she was in. Her manager notes that the storage area is really warm and wonders why she is practicing there. Yoon Ye-seul said she believes the warmth of the room results from the heat packs. Her manager questions that, though, and walks over to check the bags. He burns his hand right away on contacting them. Then he wonders where Yoon Ye-seul purchased such used heat packs, and she promptly says someone abandoned them in that room. Yoon Ye-seul says that it wasn't, as the person didn't recognize her when he asks whether it was a fan. Her boss finds it unbelievable that someone else doesn't know her yet. She hardly minds at all. She then keeps on her guitar, still improving. She suddenly finds a flaw in it, though. She says it was upsetting her, then asks her manager to adjust the strings on her guitar. We move to the group practices. While we are seeing the whole production crew getting ready, a group of lads is practicing for the event later. Then one of the employees shows in to let the director that the group girlfriend will be delayed because of traffic on the way. When the director asks how long it will take, the staff member tells him the group might arrive at the event in 40 minutes. The director requests thus to change the artist's rehearsal schedule. We move back to the point of view of the protagonist and find his companion appearing really content. Why is he so joyful? Han Jung-woo asks. Sujin says he's eager to be utilizing the equipment for the first time and then asks right away when he would be able to obtain Yeoli's autograph. The protagonist responds that although his friend claims he already has an autograph from a well-known group, he acquired it without his will. Sujin says the protagonist gets a pen and paper right away since the following performance is almost ready and it's girlfriends. The protagonist discovers, nevertheless, that the group he was looking forward to see is not the one the show starts with. Even Sujin wonders as to why Yoon Ye-seul is on stage at that precise moment. Then Yoon Ye-seul starts her practice singing gently with her lovely voice. When Han Jung-woo identifies the song she is singing, his companion adds right away that it is rather well known in Korea. Han Jung-woo shocks him, nevertheless, by disclosing he knew nothing and merely heard it in the storage room as Ye-seul performed it. When he hears it a second time, the protagonist finds the lyrics decent and chooses to download the song after work since her voice really grabs him. Until one of the production crew tells everyone they are moving on to performance number 3, Yoon Ye-seul keeps playing her song quietly. Sujin remembers right away. He remembers that performance 3 is unique since it's the one for which he practiced some pyrotechnics. Sujin grumbles while the protagonist notes that the moment he planned for the fireworks is not ideal. The pyrotechnics start then. What they are seeing surprises everyone since the band's name, Girlfriend, shows up in the heavens right the middle of those explosions. Sujin grumbles even more while the protagonist assures his companion there is more to come, which causes great anxiety about what will happen. Then, following all the pyrotechnics, a large heart emerges in the sky. Han Jung-woo believes he couldn't prove much more that hard. Sujin calls to the director's office just before complaining to the protagonist for what he done. Han Jung-woo is considering what transpired when someone approaches him from the side. Yoon Ye-seul questions about the heat packs he left in the room during her rehearsal. He says he's not one of her fans, so he apologizes. Yet, he feels bad about his comments. Then he adds he will start to be her admirer going forward. His friend calls him and now he must bid her farewell. The protagonist notes at departing that her guitar string broke. Then Yoon Ye-seul glances at her instrument and understands that mysterious lad was right all along. We turn now to the enraged event director. The director wonders how someone who has never handled fireworks managed all of that. He asks how the protagonist created the fireworks he claims he never has seen before. Then Han Jung-woo starts to go over the chemical elements in fireworks and how he changed them to get that outcome. After his explanation, the director bursts in laughter. He echoes some of the protagonist's comments cynically. Along with his friend, Park Soo-jin chooses to apologize. The director clarifies that he is merely startled and not punishing them. He even expresses wish for the fireworks to blast during the shows. Then he summons the protagonist over and asks whether he would be ready to produce more of those fireworks. The director even guarantees quadruple the cash should the protagonist tell them how to create them. While Han Jung-woo says he has moral ideas about how he should be paid for his labor, Soo-jin is delighted with the possibility his friend got. Then he requests 3 times the salary of his friend rather than his own. Han Jung-woo will progressively educate his friend how to create the unique fireworks since he claims chemical combinations are difficult to learn. The director is still dubious about increasing Soo-jin's pay nevertheless. Then Han Jung-woo adds he will also create the corporate logo with the fireworks. The director fixes him on his choice. Then he starts giggling and refers to the protagonist as a cunning fox. He so agrees with the suggestion of the protagonist. He even claims he already had Soo-jin scheduled to handle the fireworks. Then the director visits Soo-jin and orders him to pick knowledge as the new corporate representative. Though surprised by everything, Soo-jin takes the position. Not too long afterward, we find Soo-jin observing and videotaping Han Jung-woo's handling of the fireworks. Han Jung-woo precisely and technically outlines what Soo-jin needs to achieve. But Soo-jin, with all honesty, says he hasn't grasped a thing when he asks whether his friend is grasping the explanation. Then Han Jung-woo orders him to keep watching the recordings constantly. The protagonist ends getting ready the fireworks for the presentations as they chat. His pal finds his speed outstanding. According to Han Jung-woo, once Soo-jin finds out, he will become really well known. Soo-jin claims he is looking forward that day, which makes the protagonist glad to see his friend thrilled. They thus complete all the fireworks preparation. All that remains now is housekeeping, so they may have dinner. The two then went to relax at the warehouse. But the protagonist senses activity behind them before they even arrive. Soo-jin clarifies that autographs are sought for by supporters. Then his pal says he would speak with the director to have Yo-lee's autograph. Abruptly, someone shows up demanding the protagonist. Presenting himself as Ji-sun-ji, Yoon Ye-seol's manager. What he wants, Han Jung-woo wonders. Ji-sun-ji then queries whether Yoon Ye-seol's protagonist was the one supplying the hot packs. Then Han Jung-woo probes whether they experienced problems with the heat packs. Now, though, the manager wants to know where the protagonist acquired them since they worked very brilliantly. Soo-jin then answers that he bought them from the convenience store close by the event. Ji-sun-ji then praises him for the information, saying Yoon Ye-seo is equally appreciated. Then he hands the protagonist an autograph taken from Yoon Ye-seo. Thank you, Han Jung-woo. He takes the autograph, once more thanking him for everything. The manager heads. Soo-jin is glad his friend obtained the autograph of Yoon Ye-seol. Han Jung-woo begins to wonder, though, why Soo-jin mentioned the heat pad. His friend just says that it doesn't matter since the packs were changed by him to work that way and not bought. Both sides turned out delighted. Han Jung-woo tries to pass off as not caring about Yoon Ye-seol, as he can now grab her attention. Then his friend inquires as to whether the protagonist would be interested in a female employee at his job. Immediately following, the protagonist begins to consider the 2 girls that particularly caught his attention at work. Soo-jin observes that his pal seems to be looking forward to someone. Han Jung-woo hails his friend and turns to face him. Then he advises his buddy not to discuss love while he is still unmarried. Once their assignments are complete, the two visit with the director. Suddenly someone shows up to welcome the director, President Yoon Dae-jul. The two begin to converse. Han Jung-woo orders Soo-jin to inform him about that person. Then Yoon Dae-jul inquires of the director whether he owns a snow machine. Director Kim says they often employ a powdered paper shooting machine. Then he probes Yum about why she would want a snow machine. Yum orders him to check the banner across from. Then he says that as part of the year-end strategies, the entire event serves their clientele. Kim responds that the machine only runs for 30 seconds and cannot handle a big event when asked whether he intends to use the paper powder machine. The protagonist, meanwhile, begins to wish he could see snow. He glares at the ceiling. He turns up his power but believes what he is attempting is unattainable. A tiny decrease starts to fluctuate rapidly. Starting to shape it, Han Jung-woo tries to give it the look of an ice crystal until at last he turns the water drop into an ice crystal. As director Kim and Yum are still talking about their ideas, Han Jung-woo crafts lovely snow crystals from rainfall. The protagonist, too, is shocked to see he is capable of such remarkable performance. President Yum chooses to save the ideas for the occasion scheduled for next week. He advises to do whatever it takes, without regard to expense. Han Jung-woo, though, cuts off their discussion. The director probes what he wants. Han Jung-woo expresses his desire to discuss the snow they so much yearn for. Then he advises they employ actual snow. The protagonist's words go foreign to the president. Director Kim also finds neither clear-cut. Even his pal missed what he intended. The concept of employing actual snow escaped none of the three. Director Kim next inquires as to whether he intended to use a snow machine. President Yum then inquires about the protagonist, and the director says he is in charge of the fireworks. Yum claims he believed Director Kim was in command of the fireworks. Kim remarks, however, the young man next to him is quite gifted. Yum pauses while he studies the protagonist. Han Jung-woo just glances back at him silently. Then Yum wonders whether he is truly qualified to create snow for the event. Han Jung-woo says he could achieve it provided he had a material causing freeze. President Yum is uncertain about the substance, so the protagonist begins explaining the substance he could use to produce snow. Yum asks where they could get the necessary material. Han Jung-woo responds that they can be found in chemical companies. Then he asks if he can check if his own company has some. Kim explains to Yum that the protagonist works at a chemical company. Yum then approves Han Jung-woo's idea and asks him to proceed with his plan. Until someone answers the phone. The person answering is Dr. Moon. Han Jung-woo apologizes for calling so suddenly. He then explains his situation and what he needs. The doctor quickly responds that she'll check if they have what he needs at the company. Then she asks if he wants the type of product used at ski resort. Han Jung-woo confirms and says he needs it within 2 hours. But she says the product is very expensive and asks if he won't have any issue. Yum, who's listening to the conversation, replies that he doesn't mind the cost. Thus, the protagonist confirms the order with her. Later that same day, already during the artist performances at the event, Han Jung-woo observes the entire show from above. He's suffering from the cold as he, unfortunately, can't use the heat packs since they interfere with his ability to create snow at the event. Han Jung-woo watches as a new group arrives for their performance. The audience goes wild, shouting the members' name. It's the famous group Girlfriend performing, and now the protagonist is about to watch his favorite group live. But he remembers the autograph he wanted so much. Shortly after, he laments that he still hasn't gotten what he wanted most from this event. Then he tries using his powers to at least get a clear view of Yoli's face. However, in his vision he can only see formulas and microscopic particles, which to him are just annoying specks of dust. Soo-chan appears next to him with a cart full of boxes. Han Jung-woo says that Soo-chan arrived just in time. After this, we see Yoon Ye-seul's performance, while the director receives the order to turn on the snow machine. He immediately asks to display a message on the monitor for everyone to see. A message appears on the monitor in front of Yoon Ye-seul, asking her to say a few lines. Yoon Ye-seul is initially confused, but she soon accepts the request. She then begins speaking to the audience. She asks if everyone likes. Then she tells everyone to look up. The audience doesn't understand, but looks up anyway. Upon deciding to look up, everyone sees beautiful snowflakes falling from the sky. Han Jung-woo is happy that everything worked out. Yoon Ye-seul also watches the snow falling from the sky. Even she is captivated by the beauty of the snowflakes. However, the production team informs her that the interlude time is over, bringing her back to reality. Yoon Ye-seul then resumes playing her song. Her song is about walking together in winter while the snow still falls, as if they were inside a snow globe. The entire audience is thrilled to hear her song. After finishing her song, she thanks everyone for listening. But as she warns about the cold, we see that the snow is melting right under her speaker. When she's about to announce the next song, a loud, high-pitched sound interrupts her. We go back to just before Yoon Yesul begins to sing her second song, with director Kim saying he didn't expect to see the first snow of the year in that way. We see the audience enjoying the while still enjoying Yoon Yesul's performance. Director Kim asks if Han Jung-woo has any idea of what he's creating that day. He even decides to thank God for the protagonist's presence at that moment. But one of the staff members shouts in distress, saying the sound director is calling him. So Director Kim asks what's going on. Then it's explained to him that due to the snow, the speaker is acting up and they might need to stop Yoon Yesul's performance. But Kim doesn't want to interrupt Yoon Yesul's show, so he asks them to try using another speaker. Another member asks what could happen if this one also has trouble with the snow. Unfortunately for everyone, the answer would be that the show would be ruined. That's when the protagonist approaches the director. But Director Kim doesn't understand his intentions and thanks him for his earlier work, saying he's too busy to talk now. Han Jung-woo, however, talks about the speaker issue. He says the best thing to do is to prevent the snow from falling on the stage. Director Kim asks if there's a way to make that happen. Han Jung-woo then explains how they can use warm air to keep the snow away from the stage, thus keeping the speakers protected by the heat. But the protagonist says it's necessary for him to stay on site for his plan to work. Kim thinks about the show currently happening and soon after approves the protagonist's idea. We see that Yoon Yesul is singing calmly despite all the earlier issues. She informs her audience about the trouble with the speakers. Right after, she receives a message saying that one of the speakers still works and that she should engage the audience for at least a minute. Yoon Yesul then begins talking to her audience. She says she doesn't like snow because it reminds her of the day she was abandoned by her first love on a snowy day. One of her fans immediately shouts that he'll be her boyfriend. Yoon Yesul then says she'll take advantage of everyone's enjoyment of the snow to sing a song she's only sung once before. She says it's a song she herself never knows if she'll be able to include on an album. Then she begins to play her song. As she starts singing the lyrics, she seems to get unexpectedly emotional. Then she stops the song and appears embarrassed for no apparent reason. Shortly after, she tries desperately to ask everyone to forget what they saw and heard. Yoon Yesul again talks about not liking snow. Now she mentions the song's name and corrects herself, saying she sung it twice in her life. After this, she starts playing again. Once more, she becomes emotional while singing that song. While the snow falls around them, Yoon Yesul sings about a wonderful person in her life. We see the audience moved by her new song, while Yoon Yesul continues singing about a person who will always make her feel good when they're by her side. At the same time, Yoon Yesul thinks about the message she just received from the production team. Another message appears on the monitor in front of her, saying someone is coming to help with the speaker issue. But Yoon Yesul feels a bit uncertain about what's happening. That's when the protagonist appears, approaching her side. She continues singing her song while watching him approach. She even tries to look away, but the protagonist keeps getting closer until he stops right beside her, holding a heat pack. Han Jung-woo stands facing Yoon Yesul, watching her sing. Yoon Yesul keeps singing while looking back at the boy by her side. But she gets distracted by the protagonist and ends up having to stop her song. Then she asks what he's doing. Han Jung-woo explains that he needs to stay there with the heat pack to protect the last speaker for the show for about 5 minutes. She then asks who he is, but when the protagonist is about to say who he is, Yoon Yesul interrupts him, saying to stay quiet since the show's interlude is over. Han Jung-woo is surprised by the girl's professionalism, so Yoon Yesul resumes singing once again. At the same time, we see someone recording her entire performance. A distant camera films her show from someone present without being noticed. He's thrilled to capture an exclusive video after 4 years of dedicating himself to fan cams. At the same time, he tries to understand why there's someone else on stage next to Yoon Yesul. He doesn't know what's happening, but in the end he says he doesn't mind since the video turned out well anyway. Yoon Yesul continues to calmly sing her song to the audience, while Han Jung-woo seems to be suffering through the situation. After all, those heat packs are very warm in his hands. But Yoon Yesul's music distracts him, at least a little. He watches her and convinces himself he just needs to endure a bit longer, until Yoon Yesul finishes her performance. The crowd cheers as they listen to her song. Finally, she finishes her performance. Han Jung-woo bows as if he too has finished a performance, but one of the production team members asks him to bow like a medieval European artist. He stands up again. He remembers his friend telling him to follow all the instructions given to him. Han Jung-woo then bends his legs and finishes his performance in the most elegant way possible. Looking at the audience, the protagonist notices that everyone loves his ending. Yoon Yesul asks to speak with him. Just as she's about to ask her question, she's interrupted by fireworks set off at the end of her show. She's startled unexpectedly, but the protagonist steadies her so she doesn't fall off her chair. Han Jung-woo then says his friend told him that some celebrities get startled when fireworks go off. Yoon Yesul doesn't react at first and just looks at him, but then she says she's not used to it. Han Jung-woo warns that more fireworks are coming, but she's startled by them again, while the protagonist smiles at her reaction. She, on the other hand, gives him an annoyed look. He then asks her to look up. She doesn't understand, but looks anyway. And looking at the sky, she sees a beautiful firework display with a guitar drawn in the sky. Immediately, she realizes it's her guitar drawn in the sky. Han Jung-woo says he planned to do that after he looked at her guitar. Yoon Yesul asks if he really did all that. Han Jung-woo, looking at her, sees that she's eagerly awaiting his answer. Yoon Yesul again asks who he is. The protagonist tries to think of the best answer, reconsidering his past actions and how he was called in his subway video. He chooses to introduce himself as a magician, since that's how he's known on the subway. Yoon Yesul reflects a bit on his words, but then says she already. Han Jung-woo is confused by her response. Then, Yoon Yesul asks if everything the protagonist did that day was magic. Han Jung-woo just responds that she's free to think whatever she likes, but he realizes that from now on, she might really believe he's a magician. She then says she finds it all incredible. But the protagonist corrects her, saying all that magic is actually chemistry. Suddenly, a group of girls comes on stage to talk to Yoon Yesul. Right away, the protagonist recognizes Yoli in front of him. Yoli says the director asked them to sing a Christmas song since the mall CDO requested it, and that Yoon Yesul should also play the instrumental, as half of the equipment broke due to the snow. Afterward, Yoli finally notices the protagonist's presence. Han Jung-woo even thinks about asking for an autograph, but quickly changes his mind. Seeing the situation, he wonders if Soojin was right in what he said earlier, as now his eyes are more focused on Yoon Yesul than on Yoli. He then excuses himself from the girls, and is about to leave when Yesul asks him to wait. She asks him to stay by her side a little longer, as she's cold and can't play her guitar with frozen fingers. Han Jung-woo then looks at the heat pack and sees that it can last through one more song. So, he agrees to stay by her side for one more song. But the girls from Girlfriend say they want to sing along with Yoon Yesul, while the protagonist is happy about the opportunity he's getting. To him, it's turning out to be a great day. At the end of the girls' performances, Han Jung-woo watches the production team wrapping up the show. He thanks the heat pack for all its hard work. His attention turns to the audience still in the venue. Everyone is still immersed in the show, when suddenly promotions and raffles for mall shopping are announced, making everyone immediately leave to go shopping. Another thing catches the protagonist's attention after that. The girl who was beside him wouldn't stop staring at him, to the point of making him uncomfortable. Han Jung-woo then notices that she is stunning even among other celebrities. Meanwhile, Yeoli says goodbye to Yoon Yesul. Han Jung-woo thinks about asking for an autograph, but immediately decides against it. But suddenly, Yoon Yesul introduces herself to the protagonist. At first, he doesn't understand her actions. When he responds that he already knows, Yoon Yesul asks how he knew. He then says he heard her song on the radio that morning. Yoon Yesul mentions that this is a song from 2 years ago. Then she asks if he has her signed CD and tells him to listen to her song. She tries to leave a message in case the protagonist enjoys her music, but loses the courage to speak. Han Jung-woo looks at the heat pack. Then he suggests she ask her manager to buy a heater, since he couldn't buy the specific heat packs that Ji Seung-ji wanted. Yoon Yeseol asks if he's talking about the compressed reaction heat packs. This way, she shows she understands what the protagonist was doing. Then she states that she knows he's not what he claimed to be, and asks what he does. Han Jung-woo replies that he's a chemist. Before they can continue the conversation, they are interrupted by Yoon Yeseol's manager, who tells her she needs to leave soon before more fans gather at the exit. Immediately, she responds that she's already leaving. Then she says that if the protagonist likes her music, the two of them will meet again in the future. Han Jung-woo is confused by her statement, as he doesn't understand what she meant about meeting again in the future. Shortly after, we see Soojin impressed that the protagonist shared the stage with someone as incredible as Yoon Yeseol. Soojin says he took pictures of the performance and sent them to their group. He also asks where Yoon Yeseol is, but the protagonist replies that she left with her manager. Han Jung-woo then begins thinking about the words of that girl, becoming completely distracted by his thoughts. However, he doubts he'll ever meet Yoon Yeseol again. Then he asks his friend when they'll be paid for the work. Soojin replies that they can go receive their pay now if they want, so the protagonist decides to go change for that. But the president suddenly appears calling for the protagonist. President Yeom thanks him for everything he did during the event. Han Jung-woo asks what he should do with the special outfit he was wearing, but director Yeom tells him to just keep it as a gift. However, Han Jung-woo thinks the best choice will be to give it to his younger brother. He then says he's going to clean up the stage, but director Kim stops him and tells him to rest instead, even asking Soojin to accompany him home. Outside the event, we see many of Yoon Yeseol's fans gathered outside. She thanks all her fans. Right after, Jae Sung-ji says she did a good job. Yoon Yeseol assumes he's talking to her and responds by saying it was fun. Jae Sung-ji looks at Yoon Yeseol in the back seat, seeing her with a satisfied expression. But he mentions he was reassuring himself. The two talk about Yoon Yeseol's health. Jae Sung-ji asks her to take better care of herself and see a doctor for help. Shortly after, Jae Sung-ji changes the subject. Nami asks if she's heard that the protagonist was the one who made it snow for the show. Immediately, she responds that Han Jung-woo was by her side the whole time during the performance. Then her manager talks about her acting in a drama, but she immediately refuses. But Yoon Yeseol returns to the subject of the protagonist and asks if Jae Sung-ji knows anything about it. Her manager jokes, asking if she wants to know about the drama's contractor, but she quickly frowns. So Jae Sung-ji tells her everything he knows about the protagonist, also adding that CDO. Yoon seems to like him. Yoon Yeseol then starts thinking about Han Jung-woo, Yoon trying to avoid thinking about it. And she doesn't understand why she feels nervous thinking about him. She tells herself that she hasn't felt this way in a long time. The scene shifts to Soojin taking Han Jung-woo home. Han Jung-woo is in terrible shape. His friend says he didn't even drink that much to be in this state. Then Han Jung-woo vomits on the ground, leaving his friend even more worried about his behavior. But the Soojin praises him once again for everything the protagonist did that day. Right after, Han Jung-woo cleans up his vomit on the floor. Then he goes home to sleep. Thus, his long day comes to an end. The next morning, we see the director of KG Chemical looking over some reports from his company. He soon picks up the report from the accounting department. Then he notices that Eugene Chemical funded his project because of an intern. His secretary says that this intern was with Yoon Jae-gul during the city seminar and helped him during the Han River Railway accident. The director notes that Jae-vil sent funds directly to the intern and asks his secretary what he thinks that might mean. His secretary then responds that Jae-gil may be trying to spy on the intern. The director also sees that even the sales department awarded a commission to the intern, and the secretary is surprised to hear this. He says that the product he sold was a faulty product and that it had a very high production cost, making it hard to find a distributor. The director sees in the report that many of these products were distributed to major shopping centers. After that, he carefully examines the document in front of him. This document contains information about the intern they've been discussing. The secretary then suggests using this intern for the Eugene Chemical Project Fund. His proposal leaves the director intrigued about sending a mere intern for such an important task, but the secretary argues that his abilities were even recognized by Yoon Jae-gil. Plus, they have the opportunity to have someone like Dr. Chin, who could bring multiple investments to the company in the future. The secretary then informs him that the protagonist will participate in the afternoon meeting and asks if the director wants to see it. We see that while the two were talking, the meeting happening there was in complete chaos. We switch back to the protagonist. Han Jung-woo is feeling nervous about the upcoming meeting, as it will be entirely different from what he imagined. Initial ideas like mass development and information technology are chosen by new recruits as topics for their projects and to select the research center they want to join. But they spend more time trying to spy on each other than developing their project. Everyone had 3 months, but the protagonist only had 3 days too. But he decides to stop being pessimistic, or things might end up going badly for him. Then someone comes up beside him saying he's working hard. It's Boyoung's Sunbae. She says she only came by to grab a coffee and offers to get him one too. Boyoung heads to the cafeteria while the protagonist watches her. He notices that his Sunbae looks a bit down, but Boyoung tells him to stop staring at her because she feels insecure as she has to go to the microbiology lab. She also complains that she didn't even have time to put on makeup. Han Jung-woo says she doesn't seem any different without makeup. Boyoung interprets that the protagonist meant she's pretty even without makeup, but the protagonist corrects her, saying he doesn't see any difference in her with or without makeup. After that, Boyoung complains that he's very insensitive. Shortly after, Han Jung-woo asks what kind of research his Sunbae is doing in the microbiology lab. Boyoung says it's a government project to promote agriculture, where she and her team partnered with the Environmental Agriculture Lab. The protagonist compliments her work, but she replies it's nothing special and that she just wants to finish the project soon. Mainly because of the smell of the compound they use, the two continued talking about Boyoung's project. It's finally the protagonist's turn. One of the researchers advises him to think of everything as constructive criticism for his development. Han Jung-woo starts thinking about what to say to show them his work. He then presents his project on plastic that is stronger than metal, with a slide displaying all aspects of his project. With his impeccable and technical explanations on the subject, all the leaders watch his presentation attentively without saying a word. Shortly after, while Han Jung-woo is still presenting, Jang Tae-shin begins asking him questions, the first being whether it's true that he only has a bachelor's degree in another field of study. He quickly confirms this information. Simultaneously, one of the center leaders asks Jang Tae-shin to stop asking questions and let the protagonist finish his presentation. But Jang Tae-shin is not pleased with this. Han Jung-woo then resumes his presentation, talking a bit more about his project and its development. Finally, he wraps up everything he had to present. The researcher responsible for the presentations asks if anyone has questions. Jang Tae-shin is the one to ask again, inquiring about how the protagonist developed his idea. Han Jung-woo looks up to think about what to say. He then responds that he developed it based on the idea of using molecules already found in nature. After his response, Jae Tae-shin praises his approach and even comments that he has a very promising future. Meanwhile, another leader also praises him and even invites him to join their research center. Thus, one after another begins to express interest in having the protagonist in their research centers. One of the center leaders even mentions that they will fund the protagonist project if he joins their research center, leading to a discussion among all the leaders who want Han Jung-woo. Han Jung-woo, however, is just happy that no one seemed dissatisfied with his project. He then looks at his colleagues and they celebrate his success with the presentation. He smiles and waves back at them. Shortly after, the director praises his presentation. Then he asks if there is anything else the protagonist would like to add since he still has time for his presentation. Han Jung-woo responds with some hesitation, but since it's the director's request, he decides to do something. He then says he will add to Kim Pil-ho's presentation. so he asks them to bring back Kim Pil-ho's slide. Once they bring back Kim Pil-ho's slide, Han Jung-woo quotes one of the leader's remarks about the difficulty of isolated coding research. Another leader agrees it's tough to enter that market, but the protagonist suggests that if they use light-controlled coding, its effects would be enhanced sixfold. With this effect, the material could alternate between glass and metal. He then explains that it would save energy by using hydrogen gas and palladium to reflect light in summer and absorb light in winter. Jang remains somewhat skeptical about the research, so another scientist asks the protagonist to elaborate. Han Jung-woo points to one of the coating material alloys. Then he explains that this light-controlled alloy can become transparent by reacting with hydrogen and reflective if the reaction is interrupted. Everyone falls silent as they contemplate what the protagonist has said, until one of the scientists teases Dr. Jang, who had criticized the project when Kim Pil-ho presented it, while another scientist laughs out loud at the situation. Shortly afterward, Dr. Jang asks if Han Jung-woo has anything to add to the presentation that Dr. Hyo had criticized. Feeling slightly apprehensive, the protagonist agrees. Dr. Jang mentions he will give him more time to speak. Thus begins another presentation by Han Jung-woo, now discussing a project to improve semiconductor efficiency, adding new ideas for use and application to enhance the efficiency of the previously presented idea. Once again, the scientists are astonished by his ideas, but one of the scientists mocks another who recently criticized the project the protagonist is now defending. The criticized scientist isn't pleased at all, and quickly asks what Han Jung-woo thought of her critique of the project. He mentions that she was the one who most criticized the project when it was presented. Han Jung-woo says he only has a few things to add. Then once again, he counters the scientist's criticisms of the project, using clear and convincing arguments that no other scientist present can refute. Suddenly, we see someone change the slide again without saying anything to anyone. The slide is changed to the one about the protein polymer research project. Immediately, one of the scientists complains to manager Jeon for placing another topic on the screen without anyone's request. Jeon doesn't seem to mind and even asks the protagonist to give his opinion. Han Jung-woo asks how much time he has left, but Jeon grants him 5 minutes to speak. The protagonist begins to think about the topic. Then he mentions a critique regarding the project's issue with allergy treatment, noting that it's a symptomatic treatment and loses developmental progress. The scientist confirms his point. Han Jung-woo then suggests developing a protein polymer that could control T cells through genetic analysis, allowing them to eliminate bacteria that cause allergies and perform an analysis to prevent immune cell malfunction. Suddenly, another person raises her hand, calling out to the center leader who had been discussing with the protagonist. It's Dr. Moon asking permission to join the conversation and discuss with Han Jung-woo as well. The center leader readily agrees as she is the company's central critic. Then Dr. Moon argues that it is necessary to think carefully before applying chemical theories when using a cell that affects the immune system. According to her, the body needs to maintain a microbial presence since germs only have a negative effect on the human body. Han Jung-woo suggests that they analyze each cause of eczema one at a time. Dr. Moon asks if he means that they should analyze the causes one by one even though the causes are different for each individual. But the protagonist argues that with the high cost of money and effort, they could conduct research using current technology. Dr. Moon counters, saying that genetic theory does not yet have the capacity to conclude such research. However, one of the scientists decides to stop the discussion between them. Shortly afterward, Dr. Jang calls the protagonist once again. He asks if he was the one who came up with all the ideas presented in his presentation. He then responds that it wasn't entirely him alone because it was with everyone's feedback that he was able to develop his idea. Hearing this, Dr. Jang praises his humility and says that this is the person they want in their research centers. Thus, Dr. Jang concludes Han Jung-woo's presentation. And finally, he says that they will now discuss where the protagonist will be assigned. Now begins the discussion among the research leaders about where Han Jung-woo should be placed. Each of the leaders praises the protagonist while desperately trying to convince him to join their research center. No one wants to back down, and so they keep making increasingly higher proposals to persuade him. but no decision is made. Some merely beg the protagonist to join their research centers until one of them asks for the director's opinion. The director then first thanks everyone for the presentations and even says that they all have great futures within the company. He expresses hope that KG Chemical will be the ideal place where everyone will want to work and develop their futures in their desired fields. But Dr. Jang asks him to decide on the matter under discussion. Han Jung-woo also awaits his decision. It is then that the director says he is entrusting the division to the research center leaders. Back to the director's decision moment, he says he is entrusting the decision to the research center leaders. Jang comments, while other center leaders also discuss and suggest that they hand over Han Jung-woo. Once again, that meeting turns into a chaotic confusion that leads nowhere, irritating the director's secretary. He then orders everyone to be quiet. Next, he asks the center leaders to show more decency in their behavior. Han Jung-woo is even surprised by his stance towards the center leader. Then the secretary asks the director for permission to speak, and the director responds by saying they have the right to speak about all the researchers present. After that, the secretary says the person responsible for training will continue the recruitment evaluation according to procedure. The responsible researcher quickly responds, saying he understands and will do as requested. Following this, the secretary returns to the main and most important topic, this being the subject concerning the protagonist. He begins by talking about how the protagonist gave the impression that he could trust the protagonist's extraordinary talent to conduct research and work together. How the center leaders conducted a series of questions that served to gauge the skill level of that intern, and how this reflects the director's statement about researchers being specialists with exceptional skills in their fields, but that they can still reach even higher levels over time and by surpassing their superiors, until reaching executive positions as a generalist, a knowledge level where one has a broad perspective and comprehensive knowledge necessary to reduce errors in research through the appropriate use of resources. And for that reason, he says he believes the protagonist is the ideal person for this role, to develop in all areas as a talented product. Then he asks everyone if, after all this, they still intend to delay what needs to be done. Dr. Jang seems confused by the secretary's intentions. The secretary then says he has a suggestion regarding what to do Han Jung-woo, which would be to make Han Jung-woo a general researcher and have him gain experience in each research center for 6 months. One of the researchers asks if this would be possible under the company's regulations, and the secretary immediately responds that with the director's approval, it is possible. And to top it off, Han Jung-woo received project assistance grants that, unfortunately, can only be executed when he is a general researcher. Upon hearing this, the researchers are impressed with the information that Han Jung-woo received research project assistance. After this, the secretary looks to the director to see what he will say. The director then praises Dr. Shin's words and composure. Dr. Shin then asks the center leaders for their matter. All the leaders remain silent, unsure of what to respond, while the director simply observes them. Then Dr. Shin replies that he believes there is no disagreement among them, while Han Jung-woo observes both of them, the Research Institute veteran who made the suggestion in front of everyone, and the director, who with his decision made the situation indisputable for the center leaders, but who still do not seem fully aware of what was actually happening. In the end, the protagonist is happy that it ended this way. Shortly after the end of the presentations, there is Ban Ki-tae asking if they will be notified at night about which centers they will join, while another rookie responds that the department head needed to visit each center they chose first and would only then notify them. Ban Ki-tae reflects on this but soon changes the subject, mentioning that Han Jung-woo will have to undergo another evaluation. Then he asks what he will do from now on. But even Han Jung-woo himself has no idea what he will do, since for him, the only change will be that he will no longer be called an intern. That's when he remembers something important about his intern position, prompting him to wonder what will happen to the intern contract he signed when he joined the company. Relevant and more questions flow through his mind. But at that moment, someone approaches his side. It's Dr. Moon coming toward him. She arrives saying that the evaluators' meeting is over, and with that, they have decided to start on the first day of January next year. However, Han Jung-woo doesn't understand what she means and asks what they will begin. Dr. Moon immediately responds that it will be the training. First, he will be affiliated with the intercalation study in the first room as a general researcher to be rotated through each research center. She also informs him that researchers not involved in projects will only be freelancers. With everything said, Han Jung-woo now asks what will happen with his intern contract. But before she responds, the protagonist feels anxious about what her answer will be. Then she replies saying that nothing will change. Right after, she says goodbye and mentions she's going to the hospital. But Han Jung-woo stops her before she leaves. Then he says that regarding his special condition, there is something important he wants to ask, because only she can help him. So Dr. Moon tells him to go ahead and ask his question. Han Jung-woo begins by saying he hasn't been sleeping well, as he constantly wakes up during the night or collapses during his downtime, unsure if these are consequences of overworking. Suddenly, Dr. Moon approaches Han Jung-woo, and as she says that now he has mentioned it, she is starting to notice that his face is showing some symptoms. Han Jung-woo feels confused about what types of symptoms, and Dr. Moon quickly responds that it's early signs of distress. Then she bends down in front of the protagonist, grabs one of his hands, and then begins observing it. Realizing that Dr. Moon was just conducting a diagnosis, the protagonist feels relieved, understanding that her sudden hand grab wasn't anything serious. But he keeps looking closely at her face, even blushing from being so near her. Right after, he decides to speak to her, saying that his pulse might be irregular, but it could be a different symptom from what she thinks. Dr. Moon responds that she's examining him with these conditions in mind. Han Jung-woo asks what kind of considerations she is factoring into her examination, and she immediately replies that his pulse is normal. Then Han Jung-woo asks if it might be due to late work hours, but Dr. Moon quickly responds no, as that would be unusual too. After all, young adult men usually don't have so many issues with extra hours. So she asks him to get a checkup, and since it's also time to leave work, she asks the protagonist to meet her at the parking lot when he's ready to go, as she'll take him to the hospital. Hearing this, the protagonist is surprised by her words, but also sees it as an opportunity to uncover some things. Meanwhile, the other newcomers are bewildered, watching the protagonist. Everyone is incredulous after seeing Dr. Moon conversing with a mere intern. Even Han Jung-woo notices that now they are more envious than when the center leaders were giving him so much attention. Later that same evening, Dr. Moon continues her examinations on Han Jung-woo. She asks Han Jung-woo to rest a bit while the tests are being processed. Right after, the protagonist says he's feeling too tired and will rest a bit on the chair. He's so sleepy that he can barely keep his eyes open. Seeing this, Dr. Moon says she will get a bed for him. Han Jung-woo is startled by her words, but Dr. Moon takes him to the on-call worker's room. Then she points to one of the beds and says that's her bed and the place where the protagonist will lie down. She then asks him to go and sleep a bit until she brings the test results. Han Jung-woo then goes to the bed to sleep and apologizes for lying on her bed. Thus, his eyes start to close. Shortly after, Dr. Moon is reviewing the tests done on Han Jung-woo. Several tests were conducted on him, and now she has the results of those tests. Then, she returns to the room where the protagonist is sleeping, calling his name again. But Han Jung-woo continues to sleep on her bed. She regrets not being able to give him a few intravenous drops, but she still decides to let him sleep peacefully. A bit later, seeing that the protagonist was still asleep, Dr. Moon is now in her bath. After finishing her bath, she puts on casual clothes until suddenly her phone starts ringing. An unknown call was ringing, but she decides to answer it and even addresses the unknown person as doctor. This unknown doctor says he received her email and asks how Han Jung-woo is doing. Dr. Moon replies that he was normal, as expected, and the unknown doctor asks if they had any other issues. Then, Dr. Moon mentions the protagonist's condition, but says that the tests indicated everything was normal, so they might have to find a specialist in the area. But the doctor remains uncertain about this decision. The doctor says that Han Jung-woo is using senses he's not accustomed to, so he would still be going through an adaptation process. Immediately, Dr. Moon comments on how the protagonist is enjoying his powers, and that's why he's so much like him. Upon hearing this, the doctor gets excited about the protagonist and even jokes, telling Dr. Moon to be careful not to fall in love with him. Then he asks how her research is going. He keeps telling her not to be a perfectionist and to follow her emotions, but she ignores his words and asks what kind of world Han Jung-woo sees. The doctor asks that she's asking that question because she's sad about not being considered for a position of power, but she responds that she doesn't know how to handle the protagonist. She then asks when he will return, and he replies that he will still be away for another month. He bids her farewell, telling her to find a boyfriend by the end of the year. Later, Dr. Moon watches the protagonist sleeping in his bed. The doctor's comment about her finding a boyfriend crosses her mind. It even makes her thoughtful for a moment, but she remembers that, unfortunately, she can't afford the luxury of a love life. A little later, the protagonist finally wakes up. As he gets out of bed, he finds Dr. Moon by his side, saying that he slept for almost 2 whole hours. Dr. Moon then performs a few more checks on the protagonist. Shortly afterward, she says that his pupil looks normal and his eye tremor has disappeared, but she still finds some things odd. Since insomnia usually causes stress when a person feels tired during the day and doesn't sleep well at night, Han Jung-woo mentions that he felt that way when he fainted a few days ago. Dr. Moon asks if he knows the difference between what happened before and what happened today, but his thoughts focus on the woman's behavior in front of him. Thinking about how she looks cute at that moment, he ends up remembering Yoon Ye-sul. The two look at each other for a few seconds, but soon after, the protagonist turns his face away and responds that on the day he fainted, he had a part-time job at an event. Moon then asks why he took that part-time job. Immediately, Han Jung-woo responds that he really wanted an autograph from a celebrity. Then he asks what symptom he was having. Moon simply hands him a hospital card, asking him to get a checkup there. With that, Han Jung-woo becomes worried, wanting to know if the exam revealed something serious. Moon explains that the exams didn't show anything serious, and neither do his problems seem severe. Her words make the protagonist reflect for a while. Later that same day, while traveling by train and complaining about feeling tired and sore, Han Jung-woo now looks for a song to pass the time on the train. He decides to search for a song by Yoon Ye-sul to listen to. Right away, he finds Ye-sul's performance video from the past event. He plays the video, and surprisingly, he enjoys Yoon Ye-sul's music. He even says he'll listen to her second album later. But while browsing through YouTube recommendations, he notices a video where he appears. It's the video where he was teaching his friend Soo-chin to make custom fireworks. Immediately, the protagonist calls Soo-chin. Soo-chin answers the call and soon after asks why his friend is calling him so early. But Han Jung-woo and Rage ask why Soo-chin posted the video on YouTube. Soo-chin explains that the guy who edited the video was the one who posted it online, promising it would go viral and the profit would all go to Soo-chin. He also explains that the person who edited the video was a guy named Shin Ki-jun, and this guy was surprised to learn that the protagonist was a chemist. Han Jung-woo still complains about them posting it without his knowledge, while Soo-chin asks if he wants to take another part-time job. Upon hearing this, Han Jung-woo immediately hangs up the call. Seeing that he can't change the past, he now searches his name online to see if his identity has already been revealed. To his relief, his name is still unknown, so he tries to search for the title people are using to refer to him on the internet. He finds some articles talking about his magical actions during a presentation at the mall. At that point, all his sleep completely disappears. Shortly afterward, the protagonist arrives at the research room. One of the researchers shows him his seat in the office. When he arrives at his seat, he notices that the seat next to his belongs to Boyoung. Then he asks the sunbae in front of him where Boyoung is, and she promptly replies that Boyoung is on a business trip to Daejeon, but she cleaned the entire place as soon as she heard the protagonist was coming. Her sunbae even says this is the first time she's done that. Han Jung-woo feels extremely grateful and happy with Boyoung's actions. Suddenly, his cell phone starts ringing near him. He picks up his phone and sees that they were messages from Boyoung. The two chat a bit, and the protagonist feels happy talking with Boyoung. Then his life in Research Room 1 finally begins. Thus, the days go by, facing the same routine every day. A few days pass, and the protagonist can no longer bear his routine. With his condition worsening more and more, the protagonist realizes he'll need to schedule a doctor's appointment. But suddenly, he checks the date and realizes Christmas is approaching. His routine was so tiring that he hadn't even remembered Christmas was near. Han Jung-woo then takes the clinic's card, remembering Dr. Moon's words about his insomnia problem. He decides to call the clinic and then finally schedules an appointment to try to help his insomnia. With his appointment scheduled for 8 p.m. at the sleep clinic, he now checks how long it will take to get from his home to the clinic in the other city. But to his surprise, his younger brother is there at his house. His brother says he's there because he felt the protagonist needed help, so he came to help him. But Han Jung-woo doesn't believe his words and even teases him. Then he asks what the real reason is for him being there. That's when his brother says someone confessed to him. Han Jung-woo can't believe someone could have confessed to him, but his brother replies that the girl is sane and even pretty. The problem is he doesn't know what to do in a dating relationship. And now that he's out of money, he needs help more than ever. Seeing him like that moves the protagonist's heart. Then Han Jung-woo tells him to take the girl to a popular street where people go while holding her hand as they walk. Also, he suggests being bold and taking initiative, making use of the holiday atmosphere. His little brother just watches him in silence, but the protagonist seizes the moment to tease his dear brother. Then he takes money from his wallet, while telling his brother to win the girl's heart with his unique tastes. The brother thanks him for the help and asks where he's headed. Han Jung-woo replies that he's going to a place where he'll sleep a bit. Now, in front of the sleep clinic, we see Yoon Ye-seol stepping out of her van to the clinic. Her manager wishes her a good night's sleep. Yoon Ye-seol responds that she can sleep well in that place. Then her manager mentions he cleared her schedule for Christmas and asks her to enjoy Christmas while he handles any rumors that might arise from it. She then says she will do that, but her manager quickly says he was just joking and not to do any of it. Then the two say their goodbyes. Yoon Ye-seol then goes to the clinic. We return to the protagonist now entering the clinic. He goes to the receptionist and informs her of his appointment. Then he heads to the consultation room, noticing the tranquility of the place. He soon reaches the consultation room. After Han Jung-woo sits down, the doctor asks if Chae-yeon was the one who referred him to the clinic. She mentions that Chae-yeon hasn't asked for favors in a long time, and because of this, asks if the two of them are dating. Han Jung-woo replies that they are just co-workers. The doctor apologizes for asking such a question on their first meeting. Then she hands in a form for diagnosing his insomnia problem, and she tells the protagonist to relax and answer the questions calmly. With that, the protagonist begins to notice how the doctor seems both brilliant and challenging, much like Dr. Moon. Soon after, the doctor tells the protagonist to go to his room to sleep. Upon reaching his floor, the protagonist notices there's a VIP room there. He assumes it might be a room for famous or high-class people. We then switch back to Yoon Ye-seol's perspective. She is sleeping in a room with devices connected to her body, designed to help her sleep. Suddenly, she wakes up to some noises in her room. Then she realizes it was her doctor who was in her room. The doctor wishes her a Merry Christmas. When asked, the doctor says she has been there for about 10 minutes. Yoon Ye-seol says she was in such a deep sleep that she didn't even notice. The doctor recalls it's been 3 weeks since Yoon Ye-seol last visited the clinic, and that maybe she's only been getting short sleep during her daily life. but she's pretending to be sleeping well right in front of her. Yoon Ye-seol says that at least she managed to sleep for 4 hours. The doctor then says she'll postpone the test so that she can sleep a little longer, while Ye-seol still tries to convince her that she's fine. However, the doctor asks when exactly Ye-seol was ever fine. For a moment, Yoon Ye-seol is thoughtful, without responding. But soon after, she answers that she was fine when thinking about the melodies of her music. After hearing that response, the doctor is silent for a moment. The cause of Ye-seol's sleep problems is her early-stage persistent depressive disorder. Since she lives for her fans, she ends up neglecting her own health in the process. It's still in the early stage, but it can progress if she doesn't pay attention. Then the doctor suggests that Yoon Ye-seol grab a coffee so they can talk later. Ye-seol says she'll freshen up first, but upon seeing a certain person passing through the hallway, she immediately returns to her room, telling her doctor that she saw someone passing by in the corridor. The doctor quickly deduces that it was Han Jung-woo. So she suggests that Yoon Ye-seol go say hello to Han Jung-woo, but Ye-seol shouts that there's no way she can do that. According to her, it's her ugly day when she's neither made up nor dressed up. Seeing this whole situation, the doctor concludes that the two of them are probably more than just acquaintances. She then thinks of something to do with the two of them. We return to the protagonist receiving the news that he'll have a behavioral test that includes some physical activities. The doctor hands him a list of the activities in the tests. Han Jung-woo looks and is impressed by how detailed the list is. He's also informed that there will be some people ahead of him, which might make him wait a bit. From there, Han Jung-woo starts walking around the hospital. In his spare time, he thinks about checking in on how Jung-sha is doing. He texts his younger brother, asking if he's already chosen the place for their meeting. The two chat with the protagonist, even teasing his friend. He even laughs upon seeing his dear brother getting annoying with his words. Suddenly, he notices a girl standing at the door of his behavioral test room. He also realizes that she is the person ahead of him in the test line. So he walks up and greets the girl. They stare at each other briefly, but nothing is said after that. The girl becomes restless as she watches the protagonist sitting beside her. Han Jung-woo even notices this, but doesn't recognize her or understand why she's watching him. In that uncomfortable situation, the girl starts playing with her hair to distract herself. It's then that Han Jung-woo begins to notice the molecules around her hair. The room door opens and the girl quickly enters the room when she's called. While watching her pass, he catches the scent of her hair, then realizes it's the same smell as the bathroom across from the VIP room. So he concludes that she must be the person from the VIP room. But at the same time, he wonders how someone wealthy could have insomnia problems. A little later, the protagonist keeps wondering if he did something wrong with the girl because she kept watching him during the test. At the end of the test, she ran away as soon as she was dismissed. Then, during the physical test on the treadmill, she runs as fast as she can to hit the target and get out of there quick. Han Jung-woo wonders if it's common for high-class people not to want to be around ordinary people. In his next exam, the girl misses the target ring, distracted by the protagonist. Afterwards, she puts on her cap again, hiding her face. The purpose of the exam is to measure brainwaves while patients are in a focused state, thinking the exam will be easy. Han Jung-woo begins by missing the first one, then misses the second right after. He also misses the third on his third. He tries to calm himself, convincing himself that he just needs to hit it once, but he keeps missing even after. In the background, the girl is laughing at the protagonist's situation. His embarrassment begins to grow. Then he decides to use his power to make it easier, causing the molecules to attract each other. So he makes another attempt. The ring heads toward the center until the molecules start to react, attracting each other as if they were magnets. And finally, he manages to hit the ring in the center. Han Jung-woo celebrates finally getting it right. Meanwhile, the doctor mentions that the protagonist's brainwaves were unique in that brief moment. He asks if that's a problem, and the doctor responds that she's not sure, but will consult the director about it. Han Jung-woo accepts it calmly. Then he starts observing the girl's well-groomed hair, while she continues her test, trying to get the ring. In the end, she feels disappointed for not hitting it even once. So the protagonist decides to give her a hand, using his power to make the molecules of each object attract each other. He helps her finally pass the test. She looks surprised for having. Then she is filled with joy as she celebrates. Even the protagonist finds her cute while he's happy for her. After the behavioral tests are over, Han Jung-woo takes a break, complaining about having taken an hour to do everything. Suddenly, he notices something nearby. He hears the sound of a song. A familiar melody is coming from the women's restroom. Then the girl who was accompanying him for the tests comes out of the bathroom. He begins to notice her, until he finally realizes and remembers someone with a similar body and hair to the girl in front of him, recalling the girl who sang beside him at the concert where he worked part. Han Jung-woo finally calls out her name. However, when he calls Yoon Yesil, the girl quickly responds that she's not her and immediately runs away. But now Han Jung-woo is more certain than ever that it was her who's been running for him all along. With that, he starts to remember how she was acting all this time, unable to understand why she's been avoiding him. He now stops to think about where they are, in a place meant to treat insomnia issues. It's surprising to him to see such a beloved celebrity with sleep problems. It still bothers him to think she might be avoiding him because she doesn't like him. He even tries to calm his negative thoughts, but feels sad thinking she might not even remember him anymore. Later, during another test, Han Jung-woo can't help but feel nervous next to Yoon Yesul. Seeing that she doesn't seem to want to reveal her identity, he chooses to stay silent without disturbing. While an elderly couple next to them tries to figure out what their next test will be, Yoon Yesul helps them explaining what their next test will be. She immediately remembers that she can't speak normally to avoid revealing her identity to the protagonist, so she tries to respond to the elderly couple's thanks with a forced voice. Then patients 5 to 8 are called. The elderly couple has difficulty getting up. Yoon Yesil decides to help the lady beside her, while the protagonist decides to help the elderly man. Now in the exam room, with the 4 of them lying on nearby beds, the lady says she feels sorry for the 2 of them having trouble sleeping. Then she praises the girl's hands in front of her. She says she's reminded of her grandchildren seeing the 2 young people in front of her. She mentions that one of her grandsons is in the army, while her husband questions why she's talking about grandchildren with the 2 of them. The 2 start a little argument there. Han Jung-woo just laughs at the situation. Soon after, the lady asks if the girl with the mask has a cold and if she would like some of her ginger. Yoon Yesil quickly looks at the protagonist, and then replies that she has a cold and would like the tea. The protagonist is also asked if he would like some, but he quickly responds that he can't drink those kinds of beverages. Then he asks if she also has trouble sleeping at night. The elderly lady replies that she's always waking up because her husband snores constantly at night, but also mentions that her life has many worries, with her husband coming home late due to drinking and her grandson's health being a concern. The old man replies that she shouldn't worry about him drinking at the senior center. The lady explains that she worries about him sleeping like that and not waking up the next day. All she wants is for her husband to be at peace. Her words move the protagonist, while Yoon Yesil reassures them that the treatment will work, since all of her friends were already treated. Yesil says they remind her of her grandparents who love listening to her song. Hearing this, the lady tells the girl that she must sing very well with the amazing voice she has. Meanwhile, Han Jung-woo finds it amusing that Yoon Yesil can't hide who she is. Shortly after, his thoughts drift to his brother's situation. He even feels a bit jealous of his brother being on a date while he can't even call Yesil by her name. A bit later, in the clinic director's office, Han Jung-woo asks if the cause of his problem has been found. The director, who was looking at his test results on the computer, asks him to look at a graph on the screen. When asked what she was doing, she jokes that she gets paid to do this kind of work. Then she begins to explain the protagonist's case, saying his case is peculiar. She explains that sleep is physically maintained by the action of neuroregulatory substances that can be seen through brainwaves during sleep. She then shows a graph displaying analyses of brainwaves while he sleeps. Suddenly, Han Jung-woo begins to see dust particles in his vision. The director continues her explanation of the protagonist's case, but his attention is entirely on the particles appearing in his vision. Next, he asks the doctor what would happen if the neurotransmitters she mentioned were reduced. She responds that it would cause an unstable transition from wakefulness to sleep. And then the protagonist asks if it would be like narcolepsy in movies. The doctor confirms and adds that the person would sleep much longer than their body would usually require. There wouldn't be significant risks in living like that, but it wouldn't be recommended. Han Jung-woo asks if there's any solution for it, and the doctor immediately says that the first solution would be to use drugs for narcolepsy like modafinil. Another solution would be deep sleep training, which is her main treatment recommendation for sleep problems. Shortly after, Han Jung-woo asks about paying for his consultation. At that, the doctor proposes that he get a discount by participating in a program happening at the clinic. Han Jung-woo agrees easily, as he has nothing better to do. His words catch the director's attention, who quickly asks how someone like him has nothing to do on Christmas Eve. However, her question ends up hurting Han Jung-woo. He then says he'll change to become a more attractive person. Now we see Yoon Seol sitting alone in a room, thinking about how foolish she was for not having the courage to talk to the protagonist. Yoon Seol suffers bitterly for being so shy. She remembers how they talked the last time and wonders if she'll ever have another chance to speak with him, since the last thing she wants is to grow old alone and without friends. Her confidence then returns after much lamenting. Now, she tells herself that she'll have the courage to talk the next time she has the opportunity. At that moment, the protagonist enters the room. Immediately, Yoon Seol blushes at seeing him. Seconds earlier, we see that Han Jung-woo wasn't even sure if this was the right room. But now, in the present, with him in the same room as Yoon Seol, he sits in front of her and comments that it's the first time they've seen each other since her performance at last week's show. Yoon Seol quickly notices that he's pretending nothing happened between them that morning. Han Jung-woo starts a conversation, talking about his trouble sleeping, with a smile on his face as he speaks about his difficulties with sleep. With shyness in her voice, Yoon Seol responds, saying that she hasn't been sleeping well lately either. Trying to correct herself, she ends up getting all mixed up in her words. She then comments that she's good at talking to fans, but strangely, with the protagonist, she struggles. Han Jung-woo jokes, asking if it's different because he became a fan last week. Yoon Seol doesn't get his joke and answers in the simplest way possible, making the protagonist laugh at her innocence while he tells her not to worry, he won't bother her for photos and autographs. Soon, Yoon Seol frowns and asks why he wouldn't want to do that. Her comment leaves him confused, but she quickly explains that such behavior is normal for a fan. So the protagonist asks if he can get an autograph and take a picture with her later. But Yoon Seol declines, saying she isn't made up to take a photo with him. The protagonist is surprised to see that such a beloved celebrity could be so shy. However, someone enters the room where the two are. It's the doctor, engaging in conversation with both of them. Just as she's about to mention what Yoo-seol told her about their relationship, Yoo-seol interrupts her by tugging on her coat. Then the two begin whispering about the protagonist. Shortly after, the doctor asks if Han Jung-woo is still planning to do the program they had discussed, but she doesn't even let him respond and quickly calls him to start the program. A little later, the protagonist is sitting in a massage chair, talking with the doctor. The doctor's goal is to get the two of them talking to her while they're in the massage chair. She then asks if Yoo-seol feels any pain, but Yoo-seol says she's feeling fine. The doctor informs her it will take 15 minutes to finish the test. Yoo-seol begins to think about how surprising it is to see the protagonist again. Then suddenly, she makes a strange sound. After that, the doctor asks if she's feeling any pain. So Yoo-seol responds that she has a cramp in her feet, while the protagonist just watches. In their next test, Yoo-seol asks Han Jung-woo to erase his memory of the previous test. She even says please. Han Jung-woo senses her discomfort and decides to pretend that this is their first test together. Yoo-seol quickly agrees, saying that this is their first test together, while the doctor watches them with a smile on her face. Suddenly, Han Jung-woo receives a message from his brother about how his date is going, and so he starts chatting with his brother. At the same time, Yoo-seol also messages her manager, asking him to pick her up later. After sending the message, she looks back at the protagonist. Han Jung-woo notices her immediately. Then he starts another conversation, mentioning he heard about her singing in Hongdae. Hongdae is a very famous area in Korea, where many aspiring artists perform and some well-known Korean bands originated. He comments that he found out about it while researching more about her career. The girl is happy to know he looked her up, but also asks him not to search for Yoon Yoo-sul. Han Jung-woo even searches for it, but Yoo-sul tells him to put his phone away right. He tells her he won't watch it now because his brother is on an important date. Han Jung-woo then shows his phone to Yoo-sul, saying he mentioned Hongdae because he wanted to compare his revenue with another place. Yoo-sul looks at the place he's showing and says she knows it. It's a live cafe that has produced many talented indie singers. But then she changes the subject, asking about his brother's date, and the protagonist explains his brother's situation. After that, they chat about their issues with their younger sibling. Then Yoo-sul asks how Han Jung-woo's brother's date is going. Han Jung-woo jokes about his situation, saying he's acting strange after meeting the girl. Yoo-sul says he's acting strange because he's with someone he likes. Then the protagonist mentions that the two of them were pretty strange a little while ago too. They look at each other and blush, until the doctor interrupts them, saying the test is over. Afterward, the protagonist says they still have 10 minutes before the next test, and Yoo-sul takes the chance to invite him to get a drink together. She feels a bit nervous after inviting him. However, Han Jung-woo calmly accepts her invitation, leaving Yoo-sul extremely excited, while Han Jung-woo also seems to be time with Yoo-sul. In a room with a Christmas tree, the tree's decorations catch the protagonist's attention. He activates his power once again. Then he starts seeing the molecular composition of the Christmas ornament. The composition seems to want Han Jung-woo to touch it, and so he does without thinking twice. Then the whole tree appears to glow differently than before. Yoon Yoo-sul enters asking what he's doing, but her attention is quickly drawn to the beautiful tree in front of her. Seeing this, the protagonist feels happy for having altered the tree. One of the lights seems to be about to burn out. However, Han Jung-woo doesn't want to end the moment they're having, so he says he'll show Yoo-sul a magic tree. Yoo-sul accepts with a bit of doubt about what he wants to do. When he picks up one of the tree ornaments, the whole tree takes on an even more beautiful and enchanting glow. All that glow immediately captivates Yoo-sul. She remarks she has never seen a tree with such a distinctive radiance. Han Jung-woo responds that it should be referred to as the chemical tree, since a chemist handled it, and Yoo-sul laughs, mocking him on the moniker he assigned. Returning to the head doctor's office, the physician orders Han Jung-woo to treat his sleeplessness following guidelines. Han Jung-woo queries her, though, how she would know he is doing as directed. The doctor then emphasizes that she is trusting him to follow the directions, since this is the most crucial component of the treatment. Being in the presence of someone you like is, after all, the first step toward development. She also wants him to be at ease as if he is engaged in his preferred activity. She also orders Yoo-sul to precisely observe the guidelines. She then tells Yoo-sul she performed well on the therapies she underwent with the protagonist. She ends the presentation and thanks both of them for taking part. Yoo-sul tries to speak with the protagonist in the elevator on their way out, but a call cuts off. Asking Yoo-sul to wait a few seconds, Han Jung-woo picks his phone. His brother bursts out screaming he's in trouble as soon as he responds. He recently lost his wallet. Hence, on the phone, he asks his older brother to assist. Declaring it will be the only time they will do this, Sir Han Jung-woo agrees to assist. He tells Yoo-sul that his brother lost his money while first being sidetracked strolling arm in arm with a girl. Yoo-sul, nevertheless, is more worried about his brother strolling arm in arm with a girl. Their conversation in the elevator centers on returning to the clinic next week. They then thank each other for the company and pledge to get together once more for the next therapy session. Yoo-sul is content since she performed well in her exchange with her new friend. Then he gets back to his car, where his manager is waiting. Seeing her smile, her manager probes what happened. Yoo-sul attempts to act cool, and they chat for a little until the manager brings up the director's music, totally souring the positive atmosphere she was in. She then starts going over the directions from her treatment plan. From her automobile, She then spots the protagonist waiting at the bus stop. She recalls him declaring he would be helping his brother at the live cafe she had suggested earlier. Seeing that one of her treatment directions is to accompany an unexpected individual for an hour, she then requests her boss to attend the live cafe momentarily. She then notes she will bring a buddy who was with her for therapy. Then Han Jung-woo spots a car with dark windows stopping right in front of him. It is on alert right away till Yoo-sul shows up at the window beckoning him to get in the automobile. She says they should visit the live cafe together, then opens the door for him. Han Jung-woo is met by Yoo-sul's manager once he gets within. The manager identifies his face right away, recalling the protagonist for what he did at Yoo-sul's mall presentation and how he became White Mage at the synthetic snow event. After asking whether Han Jung-woo has gotten calls from an agency, the manager then suggests he join his agency. Yoo-sul resumes driving though, while he maintains focusedly glancing at him. Yoo-sul talks about his brother when Han Jung-woo returns to check his phone. She then marks off the requirement of accompanying an unexpected person. Manager Ji bids farewell and notes he has a meeting when they go to the live cafe. He leaves happy to see Yoo-sul in nice company since she is even displaying expressions she hasn't displayed in some time. The two then get out of the car together, and now Manager Ji finds he could have to deal with speculations about Yoo-sul having a lover. The protagonist is glad to be with Yoo-sul as the two heads the cafe. This girl did, after all, seem beautiful even with a cap and mask concealing her face. Yoo-sul asks whether she would be recognizable in that attire. Then the protagonist quips, stating he seems to have seen that sight several times that morning. Yoo-sul starts to fear right away, trying to explain he wasn't her past. Then Han Jung-woo admits he was wrong. They reach the venue of the live cafe. Han Jung-woo notes the location as what people refer to as antique. When the two arrive at one of the doors, Yoo-sul advises they visit the artist's entrance instead, and so proceed to the event staff entrance. Still, the place remains closed and nobody from within is responding. When Han Jung-woo queries whether the door does not open, Yoo-sul promptly answers. Then he begins to observe rust on the door. He tells Yoo-sul it appears nobody has visited for almost 3 months. He then discovers still another door close by. Yoo-sul, however, doesn't pay attention and questions if the door could be opened. She looks back and discovers the protagonist has opened. Han Jung-woo claims he opened it, not sure whether it was unlocked. The two thus walk inside the door. Before Yoo-sul gets to the exit door, they pass through a chamber resembling a dressing room. She then orders the protagonist to go over and present his brother. Han Jung-woo thus begins seeking for his brother among the couples seated there. At last he sees his brother and the female he was out with. Then he tells Yoo-sul, pointing to his brother, who she is quite happy to see. The girl next to Han Jung-woo starts his heart to race. Yoo-sul says how much the two resemble and gets thrilled. Then Han Jung-woo wonders who appears older between them after viewing the brother of the protagonist. She claims, chuckling, that the protagonist resembles the younger one. Soon after, the two began watching his brother on his date and remarking on him and the girl. The protagonist tells his brother to come over at last after the mock. Arriving all eager to visit his big brother is Jung-shin. Han Jung-woo, nevertheless, stops him and probes him on how he vanished his wallet. The two converse a little until Jung-shin spots someone staring at them from a hall door. He encourages his brother not to sweat it and just mention what else he lost with his wallet. Jung-shin claims it included just coupons. Then Han Jung-woo hands him some money, advising at least to get the girl to kiss him. But his remarks humiliate his brother. In his own perspective, he aims to inspire his brother. A little later, he advises him to dash back to the girl. Then Jung-shin states Cha Soo-jin is the name of the girl. They then stop their discussion. Someone shows up in the room Yoo-sul was watching the protagonist in out of the blue. But Yoo-sul identifies him and shows her own. The two begin discussing the period they haven't seen each other after learning it's Yoo-sul in front of him. Yoo-sul then notes the odd entrance the protagonist came upon. Her manager clarifies that 3 months ago he changed the room. The manager asks the protagonist who he is just then as he entered the room abruptly. Then Yoo-sul introduces him and says he is her manager. Her surprise response momentarily renders the protagonist. Still, they welcome each other shortly after. Then the manager informs Yusul that she is surrounded by individuals she likes. Yusul gets really thrilled with the news. The manager then offers the two of them a drink, and they each request only a glass of juice. She then brings the protagonist to see the two especially significant persons present. All eager, she looks around the room for her buddy. Yusul shocks her two pals, but they soon start to smile seeing her. Thus, as the heroine walks into the room, Yusul is going to introduce her new acquaintance, and the three greet each other. As the manager accompanying Yusul, Han Jung-woo introduces himself. First to welcome him is Shin Hye-in, and Yusul promptly notes that the manager they spoke with earlier's wife is the self-described original clever rapper, Jin-kyu, follows in introducing himself. Yusul laughs at his title, then Jin-kyu says it simply felt right. Jin-kyu also remarks that the protagonist lacks the typical manager look, which makes Yusul mock him once more for saying odd things. A bit later, the rapper starts asking about Han Jung-woo's age. The protagonist says he is 27. Then the original savvy rapper advises they have a laid-back conversation free from much formality. Not too long later, the manager shows up carrying everyone's beverage. Her spouse encourages her to keep talking with Yusul when Hye-in asks whether he wants help. Han Jung-woo also observes the serenity among these folks at the same time, particularly among Yusul, who seems far more content than usual. Jin-kyu queries suddenly whether he is avoiding. Han Jung-woo finds right away that Jin-kyu resembles his pal Soo. While Jin-kyu tries to entice the protagonist to drink with him, the two converse a little more. Talking about being a wine sommelier, Hye-in enjoys spotting the scent of the wine or grape variety he mentions as his interest. Hye-in taunts him, meanwhile, stating a regular woman would flee upon hearing him utter these unusual words. Feeling offended, he asks Yusul's view. She does, however, also reply that her impressions of his comments were not great. Now he is forced to ask the protagonist, who also parodies Jin-kyu's unusual comment. Following all the mocking, he argues that you shouldn't discuss wine with someone who doesn't know anything about it. The protagonist's strength comes on once more at that point, exposing the wine's molecular makeup. Then Han Jung-woo informs Jin-kyu he tasted his wine incorrectly. To draw his own conclusions, Jin-kyu, however, insists he is right and orders the protagonist to scent it. Han Jung-woo so begins to focus hard on the wine once more. The two then start talking on the actual aroma of the wine. Following numerous heated debates from the protagonist, Jin-kyu begins to consider Han Jung-woo as possibly a wine sommelier. He still wonders, though, how Han Jung-woo could say so much just on the scent alone until Han Jung-woo notes he is scent-sensitive. While Jin-kyu reports he is experiencing goosebumps from the protagonist, the two girls tease him once again at the same moment. With Hyena conversing with Yesil and requesting her to sing to help her yearning for Yesil's voice, Han Jung-woo simply grins and says he's a simple man, preserving a pleasant relationship between the two. Then Yesil advises Han Jung-woo to seek his brother for a music recommendation. Jung-shin tries to suggest they visit somewhere else on his date with Soo-jin. Unfortunately, his 2 movie tickets will have to be canceled. Thus, Soo-jin gets excited and thinks they are going somewhere entirely different from what she had in mind. She then passionately discusses the area she wants to visit. Jung-shin consents to accompany her to Namsan Tower. Shortly after his brother's message, he asks his girlfriend which music she would want to hear from Yesil. Soo-jin tells his brother she wants to hear a Christmas song. Moments later, Soo-jin sees someone ascending the stage. Yesil then takes the stage, declaring she will perform one of her songs. Seeing her idol on stage excites Soo-jin. While Jung-shin is astounded to see how gorgeous Yesil is even with a cap on, Yesil gestures in their direction, leaving Soo-jin starstruck with her idol waving at her. Soo-jin tells Jung-shin how delighted she is to be with him as he shows her the picture he shot of Yesil. He then understands he has not been paying her the attention she is due. Yesil starts to sing her song. He still finds it hard to believe it might be her, even though he recalls seeing someone looking like Yesil monitoring him and his brother earlier in one of the halls at that same moment. His close older sibling is on stage next to Yeseul in meantime. She softly sings her song while her new companion watches her smilefully, clearly happy on her face. Everybody starts assembling close to the stage. Together, Jungshin and Sujin savor the occasion while listening to a lovely song performed by a remarkable artist. Yeseul thanks and bids farewell to her audience at the finish of her show. She meets the protagonist offstage shortly later and then playfully sticks her tongue out at him after he complimented her, instantly blushing him. She even thanks his brother for providing this chance. His brother yells out to him from the corridor suddenly. With that, a protagonist pursues him, believing his brother might have another issue. He tells his brother he is traveling to Namsan Tower with Sujin. Then he begins to discuss the two's joint performance. Why he called him over instead of just visiting Namsan Tower, Han Jung-woo wonders. Jungshin hands 2 tickets to his older brother after remembering what he came there to do, and then teases his sibling who borrowed him money. He then inquires as to who told Yeseul to perform the song Han Jung-woo. But Yeseul shows up behind Han Jung-woo while he denies it. Seeing Yoon Yeseul there in front of Jungshin shocks him. She says Jin Kyu is going when asked why she is there. Then Jin Kyu walks by bidding goodbye to Yeseul and saying hello to Han Jung-woo as sommelier Jung-woo. Once more startled, Jungshin is witnessing his idol, but his older brother reminds him his lover was seeking for him. Yeseul says farewell to the brother of Han Jung-woo then. Now Han Jung-woo considers how best to present the tickets he acquired to Yeseul. Then he remarks casually that he has to go reimburse the 2 movie tickets his brother handed him. Then Yeseul advises they use the tickets by going to the movies together. Her rapid choice even shocks the protagonist. Yeseul then provides the justification that it's one of the directions on the list the doctor prescribed to follow, but she notes she'll be wearing a mask so nobody will identify. Feeling ashamed, right after she departs she visits the manager's office once again to pick her mask. She comes upon her friend Hyena discussing Yeseul's chemistry with the protagonist. She adds that she is aware Han Jung-woo is not her manager. Hyena wishes her buddy a nice date as Yeseul asks her to inform manager Jai to wait at the office. Later on in the movie, the two discover the room is reserved for couples dating, but Han Jung-woo still walks to his seat summoning his friend over. Feeling shy, they sew seat next to one another and try to strike small conversation to lightheartedness. Han Jung-woo next turns to face Yeseul. He tells her he liked her song Good Day really highly. Following that, he finds himself remembering something from the past, something which Yeseul had mentioned they would see once more. Yeseul asks whether the protagonist recalls her statements from bygone times as she now feels agitated. Han Jung-woo gets quite drowsy as soon as the movie starts. His eyelids droop against Yeseul's will and he falls onto her shoulder. He stays silent when she asks whether he is asleep. She so hates dragging him out even if he's exhausted. She then removes her coat. Declaring she is returning a favor for her friend's efforts, she covers her with her coat. But soon she also finds sleep. The two stay asleep there together long after the movie finishes. They bid each other farewell at evening. Yeseul makes sure they could call each other friends from that day on before leaving. Han Jung-woo responds fast and thanks her for her support of his brother's issue. With the list the doctor provided, Yeseul asks the protagonist to provide her phone number so he may contact anytime he needs assistance. He thus hands her his phone, appreciating her bringing him to the cafe and also apologizing for nodding off throughout the movie. That marks their parting after a long day together. Having received Han Jung-woo's contact, Yeseul leaves joyfully, but she gets an unplanned call from Sora. Yeseul begins telling her about her day with her new friend. Right away she answers. The two discuss relationships until Sora tells Yeseul not to obsess about the protagonist before bed, or she would have trouble sleeping over. Yeseul answers, nonetheless, that she thinks she will start enjoying better evenings starting that day forward. Days pass. Today is the new year. Watching the news discussion on the cold wave accompanying the new year is Han Jung-woo. The next day the temperature will plunge to 14 degrees below zero, according to the news sources. Now the protagonist is filled with the delight of winter as he is on his way to work. Han Jung-woo moved workplaces 4 weeks ago. Having a significant role in the organization, he develops a sense of maturity. He gets ready to enter the room since he recalls it is the first day of fresh transfers at the workplace. Shortly later, he shows there to welcome everyone. Something grabs his eye next to his desk as he is walking to it. Boyoung is asleep at the desk next his. Having arrived early for work, Han Jung-woo wonders maybe Boyoung stayed overnight at the workplace. Then he discovers that January honest was the previous Sunday, hence he knows she most likely worked extra on New Year's and decides not to wake her. A little later he finds himself caught in ideas for fresh projects he would want to do, but ultimately he chooses to save those ideas for another time. Dr. Seon-ju wakes Bo-young from her slumber right away as she arrives at the office. Bo-young wakes up still sleeping. Her awareness comes back gradually, the protagonist noting that the morning conference was about to start. Bo-young jolts awake with a loud shriek across the office, then she apologizes embarrassedly. Laughing among her colleagues, one tells her to open her eyes to fully wake. She says, although her eyes stay closed. Boyoung then adds she set her alarm, but she doesn't know what happened to it. Seeking the alarm she had set, Han Jung-woo he discovers it cracked though, and speculates that perhaps she broke. Boyoung falls in an uncomfortable quiet. She then questions when the protagonist first came. She then confides displaying her negative side to the protagonist, but he argues it's not as horrible as she believes. She argues, nonetheless, that everyone laughs since her appearance must be really ugly. The protagonist laughs at her as she gets annoyed with him after witnessing her face. Arriving, Sunju asks everyone to pay attention since he is going to provide the daily itinerary. Those intrigued in 3D printing technologies should register for the Metal Research Center project, he advises. Then he tells Boyoung she would be joining him on his next trip since their project might be included, and there will be a significant competitive offer. There will be notable business people there, hence he orders Boyoung to remain conscious. Han Jung-woo, next to her, laughs at the circumstances in meantime. Sunju also advises the protagonist to visit the head of the Basic Materials Center's office. At last, he says, they will exchange training every 2 weeks, starting from now on. Talking with Han Jung-woo, Boyoung notes that she worked on Christmas to have time on Sunday to chat and all night to finish the assignment she was working. She then insists that Han Jung-woo scheduled time for their thesis discussion next Sunday. The heroine argues, but she didn't have to work so hard since they could readily postpone for another week. Boyoung then offers they go for a cookout. Before their sunbae tells she doesn't want to go anymore, the two start arguing about which meat to have at the BBQ. But Han Jung-woo convinces her right away by saying he will split the cost with her should she. Not too long later, she presents him a new lab coat as a thank you for being a formal researcher at KG Chemical. Han Jung-woo questions if the business should be offering it, but his sunbae says he has to buy it from the corporate store and this one is unique from the other. Then he discovers his name hand-stitched on the coat. His new lab coat was embroidered by his sunbae. Now, though, he also notes that their coats will match. He covers his name by stuffing his company ID badge in the chest pocket, effectively resolving issues. Boyoung, meantime, acts as though he doesn't give a damn about Han Jung-woo covering the area where their coats match. She asks if Han Jung-woo finds her more appealing like way, as he remarks his sunbae seems puffier after not sleeping well. Saying he will answer, Han Jung-woo already causes Boyoung's heart to rush, but he responds that he is the kind of person who believes even frogs can be interesting. Boyoung storms off in rage at his statement. He laughs, stating he was merely kidding as she heads out. Later on, somewhere else, Han Jung-woo is ringing on the door of one of the head of the research. The person inside calls for the protagonist to walk in. Participating in the presentation of the new hire is Dr. Jang, the guy who developed a product that past performance of the company brought in $1 billion in profits. Jang says he considered this as fate right away, then clarifies that he had great expectations for the protagonist upon learning Dr. Chin was his lecturer since he respects 3 individuals most. Han Jung-woo is asked a question at that same instant. He has been asked whether he is familiar with fire-suppressing chemicals. Not too long later, he receives a document on firefighting tools. Jang, every chemical industry company gathers for a proposal. They lost a big deal last time since Eugen Chemical outmatched them. Currently in the equipment industry, they aim to land a contract with a fire station so they may provide their goods all around. Han Jung-woo then wonders why he was selected for this assignment. According to Dr. Jang, it will be a personal evaluation requiring carefulness. A well-considered plan from Yoon Jae-gul, who brought his research vehicle to produce greater findings, outwitted them. Their plan now is to bring in the major ace of the firm. The protagonist gets ready to reply, and a great suspense develops till Han Jung-woo points out today is the meeting day. The protagonist is left perplexed, wondering where he is supposed to be going when another scientist then shows up and Dr. Jang begs him to join along. Encouraging him, Dr. Jang then tells him he will now be attending the chemical company's conference at the fire department headquarters. He believes the protagonist is ideal for his basic materials research center, even if it has little impact and merely increases pressure on him. Han Jung-woo runs across Dr. Sung-ju in the Basic Materials Center conference room. The two then chat while the protagonist clarifies his presence's motivation. Following Han Jung-woo's justification, Sung-ju presents his fellow researchers next to him and welcomes Han Jung-woo. Right away, Sung-ju asks him to sit at his side, though Sung-ju tries to persuade him that he is there as the basic materials representative and the person doctor. Jang trusts. Han Jung-woo believes his position is not at the front. He feels even more under strain on himself with such high expectations until he starts considering his salary coming after all of his effort at the end of the month, rapidly soothing him. He then asks one of the researchers to allow him review the information to be covered. From there, the researcher next to him starts complimenting the protagonist as he listens, humiliated. The scientist slated to start the presentation then shows up. Suddenly, Boyang shows up, knocking on the door as she walks in. Han Jung-woo immediately spots her. She soon after wonders what the protagonist is doing at the table behind him. Han Jung-woo states simply that things just happen that way. The presentation starts then, and the protagonist pays close attention to everything that is said. At the forthcoming corporate fire safety test meeting, the lead researcher outlines the whole organization and the approach they should use to attain good findings. Following the conference, he instructs everyone to get on the bus since it is ready for departure. This ends the strategy session for the forthcoming corporate conference. Some researchers meet following the conference to talk further. Han Jung-woo watches two researchers talking about one of KG Chemical's light water products. He remembers reading that the light water would be used as a chemical extinguisher meant to shut off oxygen in cases when a fire starts in a pool of flammable liquid. To put out the flames, the substance would stick to the surface, creating a barrier between the fire and the air. Up until the protagonist intervenes with a recommendation on how they may enhance the product, the two keep talking about its chemical makeup. Then he starts outlining his concept to improve the product and offers computations to raise its potency. He even notes all of his computations and assumptions on a piece of paper to forward to them. The two are shocked by Han Jung-woo's whole concept when they get the paper, but they soon agree they will review it. Bo-young, who was observing from a distance, most shocks of all. She then approaches Han Jung-woo to find out whether it is indeed feasible that he enhanced an already existing project. Han Jung-woo confirms. Then, Bo-young questions when he had done previous chemical study. He answers he doesn't need it to generate fresh thoughts. From this, Bo-young starts grumbling about his laid-back demeanor, as though none of this bothered him greatly. Though annoyed, Han Jung-woo still teases her. He immediately begins complimenting her, though, saying her hair clip is adorable and that he loves how she can make his coworkers laugh and quickly brighten things in her presence. He then beams at her and asks which research project she is involved in. Bo-young advises him not to try listening in anymore since she wants him not to steal her focus on this project. She is working on a project for a coating agent for fire-resistant suits. Except for Bo-young and Sun-ju, who are arriving by auto, all the researchers eventually find on the way to the corporate conference. Shortly after, the KG Chemical researchers assemble where all the company's researchers are. The researcher in charge of the conference tells everyone on what they should do and how they should behave there. Bo Young and Sun Ju are looking around for buddies. Han Young-woo, a familiar voice, calls him from behind suddenly. Director of Yujin Chemical, Yu Jae-gul, is the one who past asked the protagonist for assistance. Han Jung-woo welcomes him formally. After Han Jung-woo guided them with a past incident, Jae-gul discusses how Ju-hana raised the product output and quality of the company. Han Jung-woo wonders whether she is also there, as Hana regrets handling so much after the incident. Jae-gul answers, nonetheless, that he is with another professional since that is not her area of competence. Not too long afterward, he inquires as to whether Han Jung-woo got the bonus he sent. Han Jung-woo, though, is ignorant of the bonus. Thus, Jae-gul informs him, following the Han Bridge case, he delivered a bonus under his name together with a consultancy fee. Han Jung-woo reveals he was not aware of this, and Jae-gul starts trying to persuade him this would never happen if he were at Yujin Chemical. The protagonist says, however, he believes they provided him a company card for this reason. Still, Jae-gul laughs, claiming he received simply a basic company card for his diligence. The protagonist notes, meanwhile, that the card he received has his name. At this, Jae-gul finds it shocking that an ordinary intern would be given such a potent card. Han Jung-woo also agrees he finds all this shocking. Then, Jae-gul probes what the protagonist came there to do. The protagonist responds fast, saying he is on his first professional trip as an official researcher, which helps Jae-gul to see Han Jung-woo on a fantastic road forward. They then cut off the discussion and go to the conference. The business people start their bidding war shortly away. First to talk is Fire Technology and Industry Institute manager. He begins the assessment by making some announcements, saying that the firefighters would be closely reviewing every project and will take what they observe into consideration. So, no complaints about their conclusions will be tolerated. Bo Young starts complaining about the cold she is experiencing while the presentation is running on, claiming she was freezing even in the car on the way there. She picks 2 heat packs to warm herself, but the protagonist begs her to loan him one. After Han Jung-woo grabs one of the heat packs, Bo Young believes he is depriving her soul solace. He starts using his abilities to raise its temperature, then hands it back to Bo Young later, shocking her with the pack's warmth. Han Jung-woo simply claims he sent the heat pack somewhat more. The Samba feels much more at ease now that the temperature is within range, and he is glad she is improving. Han Jung-woo is happy to see how Yoon Jae-gul is managing himself when he discovers during a presentation that he is with the person he described previously. Bo Young starts grumbling suddenly that the heat packs are not heated. To make the pack hotter, Han Jung-woo suggests jokingly she should show love to the pack. Now everyone is outside in the field for fire suppression product testing. While a firefighter arranges the testing, the businesses congregate nearby. Then Han Jung-woo smells petroleum in the test that lies ahead of him. Examining more closely, he discovers the combustible liquid contains some mixed chemicals. Then he watches a young firefighter in one of the tests handling fire suppression. The fire control period is all time since the firemen evaluate chemical items using the goods produced by the companies present. This initial test runs 57 seconds. The 2 researchers following the protagonist note that the evaluation took quite a long period. The protagonist says straight away that the test took longer because of a mixing in the flammable liquid. Still, one of the researchers wonders how he could know that. Another firefighter present starts the following test. This was Mr. Park, accompanying Jae-gul. Then Han Jung-woo questions why a researcher would be releasing the fire. Surprising even other studies with the record time, 23 seconds is the time taken to extinguish the fire. But Han Jung-woo starts to have suspicions about this narrative. How could that individual have simply put out the fire with an unknown mixture in the flammable liquid without knowing the product utilized in the mix? The fire suppression completes in 33 seconds during KG Chemical's test. One of the researchers notes they have been regarded fast before, but Yujin exceeded them, and in this competition second place doesn't count. The fire chief glances toward Yujin while the 5th company gets ready for their test. Then he begins chatting to firefighter Park, expressing surprise at his old colleague working for a large corporation like Eugen. Park carries on the discussion, noting that his 2 daughters were going to get married, hence he had to come out of retirement. The fire chief advises him, nonetheless, to relax with his work. Park then says he followed the policies since the auction notice said any staff member could take part. The firefighters claim, however, that the problem was not so much that the incoming students may be demoralized by the experience of someone like Mr. Park, but rather that ultimately, though, the firefighter states he doesn't mind since he wants chemical businesses to understand that skilled firefighters are most important for firefighting. The two keep speaking a little till the next business says they are prepared for the next exam, therefore starting the last test. The KG researchers find, after some testing, Eugen finished all of their tests in under 30 seconds so far, which shocks them given such outstanding results when compared to KG, who hasn't managed under 30 seconds. Han Jung-woo believes that the expert applying their products may be the difference since their chemical compositions are somewhat similar. The chemical product utilized in KG's next test grabs the protagonist's eye with its makeup and ingredients. It resembles what he had said before with the researcher's transparent liquid. At 26 seconds, they finish in a short time and surpass Eugen's 27 seconds in their test, so ranking among the fastest in the tournament. Han Jung-woo waves back while the test researcher in charge waves from a distance toward the protagonist. One of the KG researchers then says he now thinks the protagonist was right and adds he would have sent Han Jung-woo to the KG sector personally if he had known he had such potential, as he is competent enough to enhance an already completed product. Shortly later, the researcher notes that Han Jung-woo still lacks ideas for the next products to be evaluated, and that they are now testing another kind of product. Bo Young and Sun Ju are talking elsewhere about their rivals. Bo Young suddenly seems as though she is poised to strike someone. Ultimately, though, she's just commemorating her project's success in the competition. When Sun Ju sees his partner wasn't about to strike him, he feels a feeling of comfort. The video ends here then. Activate the alert bell to see you next time on Tab.